Karen, what channel is this being broadcast on? Thank you. The selectmen were on a little while ago, so we're bumping them, I guess. Okay.
Yeah,
That's it.
we appreciate that.
All right, we're ready, Karen? Okay, thanks. So welcome, everyone. This is Kristen Vincent, Chair of the Westborough School Committee. Today is Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020. I call the meeting of the Westborough School Committee to order. Thank you for joining us this evening at this remote live stream school committee meeting. Due to the impacts of COVID-19 virus, some aspects of the open meeting law have been suspended. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Westborough School Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceeding as provided for in the order. Town officials and Westborough TV have worked together to hold this meeting via televideo conference and broadcast it as such on Westborough TV's government channels and streamed online at www.westboroughTV.org/livestreamgovernment for persons who would like to listen to or view this meeting while in progress. Any votes we take this evening will be roll call votes due to the remote participation. Due to the remote format, any citizens' requests to speak at a school committee meeting need to be done through email in writing. You can email the committee with your comments at school-committee@westboroughk12.org. You can also use that email address to make a request to speak at a future school committee meeting during the citizens' request portion of the meeting. Thank you to Westborough TV for covering the broadcast tonight. And as a reminder, a recording of this meeting can be accessed at any time from the Westborough TV website. We have with us tonight on our call Superintendent Amber Bach, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Daniel Mayer, Director of Finance and Administration Irene Oliver, Steve Jarrett, the Vice Chair of the Westborough School Committee, School Committee members Sarah Dulay, Lisa Edinburgh, and Raghu Nandan. Jen Benton is on, and she's our School Committee Recording Secretary. We have staff from Westborough TV who are handling the live stream and recording of this meeting. And we also have several members of the community joining us for the citizens' request portion of our meeting. Our agenda for this evening is as follows. We will begin with an approval of minutes from our April 6th regular session, June 10th regular session, and June 20th regular session. We will have a superintendent's report. We'll have reports from the assistant superintendent and the director of finance and administration. We will have individual school committee member reports. Around 6:25, we will have building project updates. We will have an introduction to the officials of the English Language Parent Action Committee, also known as ELPAC. Around 6:35, we have citizens' requests. And as mentioned earlier, we do have several residents of Westborough who have asked to speak to the school committee tonight. After that, we will move to a discussion and vote on a school committee resolution on anti-racism. We'll have a financial update concerning grant funding for COVID-19 expenditures. And in our agenda listed at 7:10, we will begin a review of the proposed plans for opening school and starting the 2020-2021 school year. And we do have a need for an executive session tonight. So we will begin with an approval of our minutes. The first one we need to approve are amended minutes from April 6th, 2020 regular session. I guess in those minutes, it was not indicated that we had approved the March 25th minutes. And so we're going to amend the April 6th minutes to show that we did approve the March 25th minutes. So is there a motion to approve these amended minutes?
I move that we approve the amended minutes for April 6th.
Thank you, Steve. Is there a second?
This is Lisa, a second.
All right, any discussion? All right, we'll have a roll call vote. We'll start with Sarah.
Dulé, yes.
Raghu.
Nandan, yes.
Lisa.
Edinburgh, yes.
Steve.
Durant, yes.
And Vincent, yes. So that's 5-0 for approval. We also need to approve the June 10th, 2020 regular session minutes. Is there a motion for those?
I move the minutes of June 10th.
Thank you. A second?
This is Lisa, and I second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Sarah?
Dulé, yes.
Raghu?
Nandan, yes.
Lisa?
Edinburgh, yes.
Steve?
Durant, yes.
And Vincent, yes. So that's 5-0 approved. And June 20th, 2020 regular session minutes.
I move the
Motion.
June 20th minutes as written.
Thank you. Second?
This is Lisa, I second.
We're on a roll. Any discussion? All right, we'll do another roll call vote for Sarah.
Dulé, yes.
Raghu?
Nandan, yes.
Lisa?
Edinburgh, yes.
Steve?
Durant, yes.
And me, Vincent, yes, that's 5-0 approval. Even though we haven't met since June, we've got it down, people. This is great. Thank you. And
I'm
thank you
going to
to Jen.
interject for a second.
Yeah.
I'm going to, Raghu, I'm going to mute you because of background noise, and then feel free to unmute yourself when you're ready to speak.
No problem.
Great. Yep. Now that we're done with that, we can go back to muting ourselves. And thank you for unmuting and being ready. We definitely have it down. And I just want to say thank you to Jen Benton, who's been doing our minutes. We don't really have to amend our minutes because she's doing such a great job capturing what we say here at these meetings and all of the actions and discussions that we have. So thank you, Jen. Let's move on to our superintendent's report. Welcome, Amber. Welcome back. You never left.
Thank you. Good to see you all. And I appreciate you during the summer that we've needed to add these meetings, that there's a lot going on for the district and certainly in our nation, and continuing to have opportunities to stay connected for the importance of this work and to get things in place for the opening of the year. I really appreciate. Thank you so much. And it's good to have so many people joining us. And I see Claire has come in, so welcome, Claire. So the two updates that I wanted to share, we have a lot to cover tonight, so I'm keeping my updates very short. I think one of the significant, important updates to provide for you is that on Tuesday, Brian Callahan and I attended the Board of Health and presented the implementation plan for graduation to be held socially distanced on August 1st at the high school on the turf. The preliminary plan was well received. They had a good series of questions and agreed that the areas where we wanted to refine were areas where we were still currently developing some of the pieces of planning that we needed to do. So we're feeling pretty good about where we are. I think they did as well. And we left the meeting with kind of a preliminary sense that Steve Bakari could then take in the additional information that we needed to provide to them, share it to the group, and they could interact with him as a board that they felt we were good to go, or to call us forward to make some additional refinements. I think that's exactly as Brian and I anticipated, in a really positive way. We continue to have a strong working collaborative kind of model with the Board of Health. So we will move forward on that, and I'll keep you updated via email as needed. And I've been sending you those updates, so I think you have those. I think secondarily, while I was in attendance at the Board of Health, I spoke briefly to indicate that tonight you were having a meeting and that we would be presenting a draft beginning proposal for planning steps for Westborough in the fall, and that would open the door to the start of ongoing meetings with Board of Health as collaborative partners in making sure that our opening plans can be met with the expectations that they've seen it and approve it to move forward. So that's my report for tonight, and I look forward to the rest of what we're going to be covering.
Thank you. We will turn over to Daniel if you have anything to share, any updates tonight.
No, I don't. I'll be reporting later to you.
Save it all for later. Great.
Yeah.
And so Irene, do you have anything now? I know you're going to be sharing later.
Yes, I will be sharing the grant financial update, but I just wanted to reassure you that we ended the fiscal year in the black, They're still adjusting entries. So once all of that is completed, then I'll give you a report so that you can see the final dollar amount for ending the fiscal year 20. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that update. We'll move to school committee member reports. We'll start with Sarah. Do you have anything to share with the community tonight?
I do. Thank you. I have a quick, a couple things. I have a quick Rangers on Track update. The recognition plaques have been installed on the wall in the plaza, on the lower field in the upper plaza, the new plaza. I just want to thank a few people for making that happen. Maura Shunny and Maureen Johnson from the committee for coordinating and ordering the installation of the signs. And a huge thank you to Lisa Whitney Scott. She again loaned her design expertise to create a visual memorial for the project contributors. The plaques recognize the dedicated work of the athletic building committee, including Steve Durrett and Amber, Johanna DiCarlo, Brian Callahan, Rob Nagy, Earl Story. The plaques also honor the major donors, and a sincere thank you again to all the businesses, our community partners, alumni, families, and individuals that lent their generous financial support to the project. The fields, the track, the facilities are in constant use by the whole community, and that's exactly what these donors and the committee members envisioned. So I encourage everyone to go by and take a look, because it looks great up there. Also, I have an update from Safe Routes to School. Way back in February, we aligned with Safe Routes to School. We were scheduled to do a walk audit for Gibbons and Armstrong, but that got canceled in March. But I was able to remotely attend their spring webinar and their end of the season award ceremony. And Rachel, our coordinator, provided the district with address maps that could be helpful with plotting the distance to school for each of our families. So that could be helpful when we figure out our transportation for the fall. Also, some of the programs might be useful. We can conduct walking audits as time permits for the school administrators. We could also look into park and walk locations for the elementary schools that could help reduce congestion in the parking lots. And Safe Routes to School would help us figure that all out, because I know everyone's really busy right now getting school open, but there are instructions that could be sent to families and things we can place on our websites that could facilitate that. Families can also check out their resources for walking and biking to school online at mass.gov, Safe Routes to School. And the last piece is that Westborough, the town of Westborough, has partnered with the Complete Streets program, which is similar to Safe Routes to School, but for towns, on the town side. And the DPW just posted a mapping survey that I encourage everyone to take a look at. It's on the town website on the homepage in the news section. And you can just click on that and put comments in about different traffic and roads in town and patterns that you've seen. And then both of these, the Safe Routes to School and the Complete Streets, both allow Westborough to apply for future grants for road work, infrastructure improvements, curbs, and signage. So they're both great programs for us to be involved in. And those are my updates.
Thank you, Sarah. That sounds great. And I saw some stuff being posted online about the Complete Streets and an interactive map that people can go in and add comments and target trouble areas. And I think it's interesting to think about finding alternative parking that's close to a school, so that if parents don't want to go through the actual driveway, right to the front door of the school, parking off to the side in a close location, and then the students can walk together to school safely. I think that is a great alternative to look into.
Right. So that would be the park and walk option, where she could help us map that out for each of at least the elementary schools probably, and that would relieve some of the congestion maybe if everyone is trying to drive their children to school. But something we can look at when we get into transportation.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Raghu, do you have anything to share tonight?
I don't have anything tonight.
Okay, thank you. How about Lisa?
I have a few things.
Yeah.
One, I wanted to announce that the Westborough Education Foundation actually has awarded 21 grants this year in the amount of about $25,000. And just wanted to put it out there that so teachers are doing some creative things and thinking about this following year already up and running. And for those who don't know, the Westborough Education Foundation gives grants to teachers for programs that are not funded by the school system. So that was pretty great. Raghu Nandan was elected onto the school committee. I just wanted to congratulate him. I felt very proud to be next to him during the June 13th election in our town, and wanted to thank people for coming out to support us. I also want to thank Westborough TV for all that you do. You seem to be everywhere, and to be able to get our meetings up and running and recorded and archived and all the other places that is posted, that is fantastic. Thank you. And finally, I want to thank the high school custodial staff for getting town meeting to be a safe environment for all that came out for our town meeting on June 20th. I think it was pretty extraordinary. Our technology staff really, stepped up, and it was really great to see everyone, do their civic duty and come. And, it was a pretty hot day, hot and humid in the gym at the high school, but we made it through, and just was very proud of this custodial staff for really getting it together. They did a great job, so thank you. And that is all this evening.
Thank you, Lisa. Steve, do you have anything, or are you going to wait until building updates?
I'll wait until building updates, which might be next.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I just want to add a few things for our school committee member reports. Yeah, also just to add on to what Lisa had said about town meeting, I was just so thankful that we were able to get town meeting done on June 20th and be able to, get budgets voted in, and be able to have like a safe and productive town meeting. So thank you to everyone who came and all of the community members who attended, and thank you for your support of the school district and your support of our annual budget. And I'd like to thank Brian Callahan, the principal of the high school, who really helped pull that together. And the high school custodial team was amazing. And our town moderator worked so hard behind the scenes to make that meeting come together. And we had some community volunteers. I want to give a shout out to Maureen Johnson and the coordination of some high school students who helped hand out waters and help people find seats. And it was just really great to see everyone come together for that. And I'd also like to share that the school committee is pleased to announce that our superintendent, Amber Bach, has agreed to continue on as our superintendent of the Westborough Public Schools for an additional 4 years. And I feel so fortunate to have her strong, thoughtful leadership now and as we move forward together for the next 4 years. So thank you, Amber, for remaining committed to our school district and the Westborough community. You're both a resident and a leader in our town, and we're just very happy and pleased that you're willing to stick with us for a little bit longer. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I welcome the challenges of the work, the things ahead of us, and our commitment as a shared group, myself as part of that, to continuing to make our community and our schools inclusive and quality and robust in all dimensions that you define as the direction of this work. So thank you. I look forward to it. And it's a matter of stamina. I'm working on my stamina to continue to participate with you. So thank you.
Energy is key here these days. Stamina and energy. Okay, thank you. So now we'll turn over to Steve and get some building project updates.
Well, I guess I'll start with the discussion that you had about town meeting and the being in the gym. I was smart because I knew where the air conditioning was, and I stayed in the main auditorium. And so to that end, the school department has just started a kickoff meeting to work on a design for air conditioning the gym. And I'm sure all those who were in there understand why we want to do it. So that's first. And the second piece, of course, is Fails and how things are at Fails. I've heard a couple of comments in terms of the mountains of dirt that exist on the site and where the kid's going to play if we go back to school in August. Kristen, I just sent you an email with a drawing of where the temporary playground is. And if you could make that available to the public, I think that would probably help the discussion a little bit. And generally, for those who know Fails, when you went into the main entrance of the building, if you then looked out over the handrail there, you were looking at what was the paved basketball court. And so we've enhanced that a little bit by moving some of the other recreation devices into that area, like the swings and a few other things that were scattered around the lower playground area, so that although it's a much smaller area than what the kids were used to before, at least during this period of time while the main playground area is occupied with piles of dirt, there is a place for the kids to play during this fall. And I guess just a general update on progress for the site. Things have been moving along. Obviously, we're much farther along than we had intended, because originally we were only going to start the project when school was out in June. Clearly, you see that the work has progressed. There's all the excavation is now done. As a matter of fact, the upper pile of dirt that was on the top of the hill is being used to begin the backfill behind the new school building. And a fair amount of concrete has been poured, and we're pouring approximately 2 or 3 times a week now to bring the foundation up to being able to receive the structural steel for the building. Understand as of today that we finished our review of the structural steel shop drawings, and that in fact with those markups that the fabricator, who's from Quebec, will be able to begin to manufacture the components and begin the shipping of it. Another event of great import is the fact that the original electric feed to a pole in the middle of the backyard, that pole sits in the middle of the existing or the future school building. Based on help from one of the members of the school building committee, was able to, I guess I'll be polite, and organize National Grid to get working on moving that pole. And as of this weekend, they will switch over to the temporary pole setup that will feed the existing fields through the construction project and be able to pull that pole. So now we can go full force on the remainder of the foundation of the school. So things are moving along. The only issue that has been a thorn in the side of the school building committee has been trying to keep the project on budget. And as a result of the pandemic and certain other aspects of this particular job, the trade print bids on average were below budget. The general bids associated with the non-trade print efforts associated with the school have not been so successful. And so in the interim period, we as a committee, as well as all the players, being Gil Bain, the construction manager, and Vertex, who is the owner's project manager, as well as HMFH, our architect, have been working diligently to figure out ways that we can reduce what we've seen for potential bids on the balance of the project to bring it back into the authorized amount that MSBA will fund. This is probably the most difficult project as far as controlling the budget that the town has seen, and the school committee as well. And so tomorrow's normal building committee meeting is postponed until next week, when by then I'm told that all the players who need to speak to the budget will be able to present what we need and hopefully get ourselves close enough to be back into budget so we can go forward. So that's my report for this week.
Thank you, Steve. That's a lot to catch up on about what's happening at Fales. And Daniel just put up the diagram that you had sent me, and so it's kind of hard to read, but can you,
Yeah,
is it the black shaded area that is?
Yeah, I can explain it. What you're seeing in the middle of that, excuse me, the middle of the drawing is the old Fields layout, which is the long rectangle. Mm-hmm. The black spot is on the far end of the school, mm-hmm. On the Ruggles Street side of the school, and it's the old playground. In addition to that, the far end of it has been expanded for the other playground equipment that was spread around the site and brought up in a more concentrated way, but at the end of the asphalt pavement where the playground equipment is now going to be sited.
And they also extended that space a little bit too. So for those families that know that space, I mean, it's a larger space than I think people realize, that blacktop play area, but they did also expand it, push it back with some additional asphalt. So we've kind of increased that play space, and the PGA has worked really collaboratively with Marianne and the building team to make some purchase of like flexible play equipment for kids. And given our current situation, actually in more individual play tasks and opportunities for things will work well there. So I think we've got a nice plan in place, but it does remind me it might be nice at some point to give an update out to, our families on what's going on over there.
So
Great.
I guess as an update to what Amber just said, the two trees that you see on the right laid out, those two circles, are approximately how much longer the asphalt was expanded to provide more play space. And I guess just a comment about the dirt piles. As I mentioned, the upper hill dirt is being used to backfill the foundation that has already been poured, and obviously we'll continue to use more of that. The balance of the fill, of which is not necessarily the entire pile you see on the lower side of the building, but certainly a significant amount of that will be used to backfill the foundation hole of the old school when it gets demolished. And so that's one of the reasons why that remains on site. And clearly that isn't going to happen until we finish the new school and move kids into it so that the old school is empty. So that'll be approximately in the summer of 2022 that the old building is demolished and the final removal of the dirt disappears, and we rebuild the playground in the lower area, as is the plan for the project. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Steve. Yeah, we were getting a lot of questions about where are the kids going to play, because you can't see back down into that hard top area. It's below kind of the school, and good to know that there's lots of playground equipment back there too. So thank you for that update. So we will move on to, on our agenda, we have an introduction of the officials of the English Language Parent Action Committee. So I'll turn that over to you, Amber, to introduce those folks.
Thank you. So just to give you a little bit of context, Maeve Hitzenbuehler, our ELL director, is currently working on completing the program review, the annual program that she does for our L program, and for the work she does all the way across the district, but specifically related to certain layers. There's an annual program review that she needs to complete. And one of the pieces that they've requested is just a report of the formation of the English Language Parent Action Committee, which is basically a very specific English language parent-based group that can have their own advocacy and parent forum, kind of a in terms of a affinity group based, because many of them are also actively plugged into the GPA of the parents, the PGA groups. So there's lots of overlapping groups. This group interacts with the PGA group, but we wanted to provide, and the program review process really specifically requests and provides that we have a specific ELPAC group. So I'm pleased that actually the introduction of this group happened last year, and they started doing active organization and management of advocating to bring our diverse parents together who have English language needs, that want additional support opportunities and engagement at the school level. And so they ran several meetings last year that were really enjoyable. And so the president, Renata de Oliveira, and Marcia De Silva, and Iva Mokhtar is the secretary. They really took a really active leadership role in organizing several events. They'll continue doing their work and interfacing with the building-based PGAs as well, very collaboratively, which they're already doing. The opportunity to make sure that the program review requires that their names are read into the minutes so that there's a real clarity that this action is taking place, that school committees know that these groups exist and can engage in making sure that it's one of the diverse parent groups we have across the district that you're interacting with. So Maeve will fold in an aspect of that to her report and invite interaction with that branch of parent organization as she works with you and with the buildings. So for the record, I wanted to make sure their names are in the minutes, and then Maeve wants to attach that to the program review that she needs to submit next week. And I can do further report on that with you and Maeve as we move into the fall when we look at kind of updating on where we are with different parent organizations. And that's
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, good to know. Good to just let everyone know that that organization exists and is there as a support for our parents and families. Okay, so we have reached the portion of our meeting for citizens' requests, and we have several residents joining us for citizens' requests tonight. And we're always happy to see Westborough residents interested in coming before the school committee. When we're actually meeting in person at Town Hall, we get so excited when people want to come down and be actually in our audience instead of speaking to an empty room. And because we're meeting remotely, we don't have these people in our audience, so they've joined us online for our meeting tonight. And since it's been a while since we've had any citizens requests, I'd just like to remind our audience and our meeting members about our policy. So we have a policy, it's called public speak, if you're talking about it with like Massachusetts law, but here in Westborough, we call it citizens request. And you can find the policy on the Westborough Public Schools website under the school committee tab, under policy manual. It is in a drop-down menu, and it's in section B, and it's called public participation at school committee meetings. And just a few important pieces of this policy includes that speakers will be allowed up to 3 minutes to present their material. And the public comment portion of our meeting is not a discussion or a debate or a dialogue between individuals and the school committee. It's really just an individual's opportunity to express an opinion on issues within the school committee's authority. And guests and viewers of the school committee meeting should know that the school committee does not ask questions or engage in a dialogue, but we do take the information under advisement and will follow up as needed. And the policy also states that written comments longer than 3 minutes can be presented to the presiding chair before or after the meeting. And I've received several additional comments in writing from Ala, along with some PowerPoint slides, and I've shared those with school committee members. And school committee members should know I also received a letter that will be read aloud tonight, and I will be sharing that with you right after the meeting. I had received it kind of right minutes before the meeting was starting. So we're going to start with Ms. Baranovsky. And just as a reminder, before you speak, just state your full name and your home address for the record. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Everyone can hear me? Great.
Yes.
My name is Alla Baranovsky, 27 Old Coach Road. I use the she, her pronouns. Thank you for letting us speak in the height of COVID planning season on these somewhat unrelated but very important concerns. I'm a parent of 5 children, 3 biological and 2 foster, 2 biracial, white and black, and 3 white. I'm also here as the chair of We Care, the Westborough Committee for Anti-Racism in Education. I'm joined by other members of the committee who will speak after me, as well as WPS student and alumni representatives of the BLM Solidarity Westborough. In the remainder of my 3-minute window, I will outline the 6 points of concern that we're looking to address most immediately, as well as request the actionable steps related to these 6 concerns. Those who will speak after me will provide more depth and detail. We also have submitted this list of 6 concerns and actionable items to you by email, as well as a presentation referenced here. The action items that we're requesting are 1, a meeting with Amber and Daniel to review the following list of 6 items without the 3-minute constraint. 2, a publicly stated commitment from the school committee expressed as a program of actionable items on these 6 and other anti-racist issues. This program should include a list of steps taken to achieve each goal, transparent communication on measures already implemented and those planned, and regular and consistent updates to the community. The 3rd action item is to rename Columbus Day Indigenous Peoples Day in time for the school year 2020-2021. The 6 points of concern are as follows. Number 1, currently many of the grievances shared by the students of color, their parents and teachers and staff of color are not systematically collected or analyzed. We would like to implement, with the support of the Superintendent's Office, a brief survey on the impact that racism has on our students, parents, teachers, and staff. Number 2, a recent look at the DOE data on discipline in the Westborough Public Schools has revealed that Black students are disciplined at rates far higher than white students. A separate PDF has been emailed to you. Relevant to this, we would like to learn about the implicit and explicit bias training currently implemented in the WPS. 3, a related issue to the above is dress code violations, which have been shown in national research to disproportionately affect students of color. We're therefore requesting a review of the current handbook for students, as well as practices of data collection regarding dress code violations. 4, current curricula in literature, history, social sciences, and others do not adequately represent voices of color or histories of groups other than white populations of this town. 5, current composition of faculty and administrative staff in the Westborough schools does not reflect the diversity of this town. And 6, the current practice of celebrating Columbus Day in the Westborough public schools is an outdated colonial practice entirely out of touch with the historic reality of genocide of Native peoples perpetrated by this person. Therefore, the immediate action requested. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I did receive all of that in writing, and so we have that and shared it with the committee. So thank you. It's very helpful to have it in writing. So we can move on to Ms. Krishna, and she is going to speak to us now. You can just unmute your microphone, and then you can just state your name and your home address for us.
Hi, my name's Kriti Krishna, and I live on 19 Butterfield Drive. So today I will be basically stating the experiences of a student in Westborough Public Schools currently. She couldn't make it today because it's her birthday, but she sent me this to read to all of you. To whom it may concern. Hello, my name is Nanaya Dadzi. I am a student of the Westborough Public Schools as well as a Black female student. Sadly, I couldn't make it in today, but that won't stop me. I've lived here for the past 10 years. In my 10 years of living here, I have been bullied and harassed, all because of one thing, the color of my skin. I went to principals after principals, guidance counselors after guidance counselors. Nothing changed. It wasn't until middle school that students started showing their true colors, from getting called a monkey, all leading up to the N-word. I ask why? Why do you continue to ignore the signs? Why do you continue to sweep racist and homophobic antics under the rug? Why does a Black student get in more trouble than a white student and Hispanic students combined? One day in 8th grade, I was dress coded for wearing a tank top as it was going to be 80 degrees that day. How is a 13-year-old wearing a tank top disruptive? It's not. According to the article, How Dress Codes Criminalize Males and Sexualize Females of Color by Alyssa Pavlakis and Rachel Rogman, Black female and male students are dress coded at a much higher rate than any other race. You may think that Westborough is an inclusive and progressive town, but we have so much work to do such as hiring more staff of color and taking actual disciplinary action when racist and homophobic actions occur. Schools need to do better. Schools need to look into what their values are. If you value your students, something will be done about this. I'm not expecting all of this to happen in one day, but I'm expecting change before I graduate. I don't want my younger cousins to go through what I've gone through. Thank you, Nanaya Dazi. So this statement is obviously very coming from the heart. Nanaya's statement that Black students are more likely to be dress coded than their white counterparts is extremely accurate, as there's a lot of research that's been done about this that I encourage everyone to look into. The WHS Student Handbook states, in an effort to create a safe environment, the wearing of hats, bandanas, hoods, sunglasses, do-rags, handkerchiefs, or other material that covers the head or face and or the identification of a student is prohibited. I want to draw attention to this particular quote from the handbook because do-rags are specifically used by men of color for hair maintenance. I don't know if this particular rule is actually enforced at WHS, but I would encourage us to be mindful of the fact that this is a part of Black culture, and the fact that there's a rule banning this could be seen as a form of discrimination. And with that, I pass it on to Claire, who has.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And happy birthday to her.
Yes.
And thank you so much for taking the time to read her letter and to share those points of view. Yeah, so we'll pass it on to Lord. And why don't you just state your name and also tell us your home address for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Claire Lord. I live at 38 Warren Street in Westborough, and I use they, them, and theirs pronouns. So we are taught only the most degrading parts of Black history in Westborough Public Schools. We learn about slavery. We spend a lot of time on this topic, which I think is important, yet there is no conversation about what white folks can do better. There is no conversation about reparations or how to treat everyone with respect, especially at older ages. We learn the basics of it in elementary school, and then there's no continuation of how do we treat everyone with respect based on the learned racism that is taught by social media, the news, law enforcement, lots of ways that racism is taught to children. We need to learn more about that in school. We as students do not learn about racism today, nor do we learn about the amazing aspects of Black history. I never learned in school about Black Lives Matter marches, about Black Panthers. I never learned about all of the revolutionary Black nurses, innovators, engineers, and more. I never learned about white saviorism, which means to help non-white people to look good or to help to self-serve. We need to talk about the bright parts of Black history. We also need to be talking about current racism in addition to past racism. I never learned at Westborough Public Schools that racism is everywhere. I taught that to myself. How do you expect kids and students in Westborough to not be racist when they don't learn to not be racist? They only learn the racism from others. Another thing I wanted to touch on was Columbus Day at Westborough Public Schools and the idea that this holiday should be changed to Indigenous Peoples Day. We cannot, as a town, promote the racist ideas of Columbus Day, which is a day spent celebrating the genocides perpetrated by Christopher Columbus. My sister, Bridget Lord, has created a petition to change this holiday to Indigenous Peoples Day, and she has received many responses in favor of this change. I believe hundreds. I do know that members of the administration will be receiving this petition soon if they have not already received the results. Racism is here in our schools, coming from every type of person inside the school. We see it from teachers sending kids to the office for wearing do-rags. We see it from students calling other students the N-word. Yet this is slid under the rug to keep our reputation as a school intact. We need to have the hard conversations in order to move forward, let alone look forward for our school's future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire, for your words. And we will finish up with Ms. Reed, and you can just state your name and your home address.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Shaquan Reed. My address is 259 West Main Street, and I am a resident here in town. I have 2 kids in the public school system, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am part of the group. I've joined We Care, the Westborough Committee for Anti-Racist Education, with a large number of our fellow residents to address issues that have been long-standing since the founding of our country and are new, I think, to many folks who are beginning to recognize that they exist and how prevalent they still are. And that's one thing that's come out of this moment is that more folks are aware of many people's subjective lived experiences, including my own within this town. And so one of the goals of our organization and coming to this committee meeting is to really work with the school committee as we begin to really critically examine the role of systemic racism, implicit and explicit bias within our school system, not just from administrators or from teachers, from students, from our whole community. And so one of our goals really is to examine the ways in which racism has been woven through the way we teach students, what our students' experiences are. And so we have several action items that we hope to leave with. We won't get to talk with you about them today specifically, but we hope to follow up as Ala mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. We hope to follow up with you in a longer term to address the following things and ensure that these things happen. One of those things is for our group is to partner with you and form a subcommittee of the school committee made up of representatives from the community groups, from parents, from students, from faculty, from administration, and any citizens who are interested in participating to address these issues together to ensure that they are implemented. Additionally, we want a commitment from the school committee for complete decolonization of all aspects of public education and transparent communication about the ways in which our teachers are being trained, what kinds of initiatives are being put forth through the school, as well as regular updates on their progress. We recognize that trainings have been done. We'd like to know what they are. We'd like to be part of understanding the curriculum and making sure that there's an anti-racist component in all aspects of it. And we want to partner to do that work. So we hope that we can work together to ensure that these things take place. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for coming forward. You were also well prepared. And we thank you for your comments tonight, and our committee and the school district staff and faculty are very open to engagement on this topic. And we will continue to focus on anti-racism in our district. And we do hope to partner with you and work together. I feel like the topics that we heard about tonight, they're not standalone topics. They're interconnected into everything that we do as a district. They're connected to the greater Westborough townwide community. So we look forward to partnering with you and our community to create some positive change. And I know Superintendent might have some words too.
So thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you here, as Kristen said, to join our meeting. We certainly do welcome the conversation. I want to speak on behalf of the Westborough leadership team. We actually were in our leadership retreat today. We have a second day tomorrow. We specifically rotated the work we had wanted to do around equity and some development of our next strategic planning till after we listened to comments tonight. And I know that all of the things that you forwarded we'll pull right into our documents tonight to look at tomorrow. We've been gathering the comments, the emails, the things that we've received from families and students. I mean, I met with Nanaya after the first March and be able to take those comments, and we're bringing those forward to leadership for reflective storytelling and discussion. We welcome partnering on these conversations with you and school committee. And it's all of us in this to continue to move the targets forward to make the school district, the town, the community, and the nation we want. I totally agree. So thank you for joining us. And I think Daniel was going to make a brief comment as well.
I want to echo what Amber was saying. I invite the opportunity to sit down and meet. Ala, I think, Amber and I would definitely like to do that. I think we'll just have to reach out to you and find an acceptable date. There's a lot going on with opening and our planning, and then vacation schedules. I'm about to go away on vacation, but I would anticipate by like the middle of August, we might be able to get a meeting together. As far as, the only other thing I guess I might add is I do want to sit down with you all and look at the discipline data. I was very disturbed when I heard what you were saying about the data, and I did take a look at it. While I do see when you look at, there are different ways to look at that data, but I do see that, when we have 82% of or 82 students who are Black who were not disciplined and 3 who were, last year, and then the year prior to that, 83 who were Black who were not disciplined and 3 who were. When you put them into percentage terms, it gives a little bit of, it's hard to interpret. So I think that we do know that those, when we talk about the 3 students that are in your data that end up being a part of a percentage point, the vast majority, we have 97 to 98% of our Black community, they didn't experience any disciplinary actions And so, the Department of Education data is there for us to review together, and I'd be interested in sitting down and talking to you more in detail about it.
I would love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. We appreciate you taking the time to come to our meeting. And as I mentioned before, if other people are interested in speaking during Citizens Request, you just need to send an email, school-committee@westboroughk12.org, or directly to me, Vincent K. at westboroughk12.org, and we're happy to find time to have you speak. And Ala will be in touch with you kind of as a representative of We Cares for some action steps and setting up some meetings in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
And that leads us really well into the next portion of our meeting on our agenda, which is a resolution on anti-racism. And before we look at that, I do want to publicly acknowledge along this topic that on July 5th, the school committee received an open letter from a group called the Westborough Students for Racial Justice. This is a group of Westborough students and alumni who sent a letter that included a set of action steps and the signatures and testimony of 295 members of the Westborough community. That also include teachers and parents and students and alumni who have graduated and moved on. And a lot of the action steps in that letter also mirrored some of the things that Ala was sharing with us as well. So I just wanted to put that on the public record and publicly acknowledge that we received that, and that's also helping to inform our discussions and kind of what we're doing around anti-racism. So the resolution that we have comes from MASC, that's the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, and the many school districts have already passed this resolution or a version of this resolution. And Daniel, if you have it, could you put it up off of, I think it's a link in the agenda. And I will read it aloud. Yeah, thank you. And I noted for my school committee members, there's a line in here in red that I added. It was suggested language to add in to kind of strengthen a piece of this resolution. So this would be the Westborough School Committee Anti-Racism Resolution, whereas as schools have the responsibility to equip students with their civil right of obtaining a free and appropriate public education, it is the responsibility of each school to ensure we create a welcoming community for all students. And whereas it is the responsibility that every district provide to all district staff, including school committee members, annual professional development on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And whereas every district will commit to recruiting and retaining a diverse and culturally responsive teaching workforce. And whereas every district will examine their policies for institutional and systemic racialized practices and implement change with sustainable policies that are evidence-based. And whereas every district will examine their existing curriculum tools and instructional practices for underlying racial biases and work to remove them. Whereas every district will incorporate into their curriculum the history of racial oppression and works by Black authors and works from diverse perspectives. And whereas we as school district leaders can no longer remain silent to the issues of racism and hate that continue to plague our public and private institutions. Resolved that Westborough Public Schools and all the school districts in the Commonwealth must guarantee that racial practices are eradicated and diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded and practiced for our students, families, faculty, and staff. We must ensure our own school culture and that of every district in the Commonwealth is anti-racist, and acknowledge that all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. So I'd like to open this up for discussion. And I think we could start with what's outlined in red and thinking about adding that. Sarah had brought this to my attention. It was in some other school committee members were sharing in other districts about how they were modifying this document to be more personal to their own curriculum and the work that they're already engaged in. And this was a line that was added in, and Sarah had brought this to my attention, and thinking about the line right after it says that we will incorporate into our curriculum, but we kind of wanted a stronger looking at curriculum and instructional practices. So any comments from the school committee about whether they're in support of adding in that line or anything else about the resolution?
This is Steve Durrett. I would support the inclusion of the outlined in red section and make a motion to do so.
Thank you.
This is Sarah. I can second that motion.
Okay, great, thanks. And so I guess we should have a roll call vote on admitting the red portion into the resolution, and then we can have a motion to see if we'll accept the resolution. So let's go ahead and do that.
Can we have discussion first on that? In other words,
oh yeah, after the other discussion about the red portion there.
yeah, so having read other resolutions from other towns, I think the reason the red portion to add that is significant. Is that I also see teachers already starting to study the pedagogy issues surrounding, becoming anti-racist practices in their classrooms. So I think partially supporting what we're starting to see our individual teachers already heading towards. And also having read more and more about curriculum and institutional practices with, underlying biases, racial biases. I think this is part of what makes it's different. It's different than all the ones I've seen. And if you put it together, it was the missing piece in the resolution, I thought. So really important. So I'm in support.
Thank you, Lisa. And Raghu, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yes, I wanted to say I'm in full support of that, and we should leave it open for adding some more. I'm open for strengthening it more as we go along, trying to add more resolutions into the document, because I still feel we can do a lot more than this.
Thank you. That's an important point. And so, this could be a starting place where we, maybe vote to approve this resolution as it stands. And as we look at our next 5-year strategic plan and the work that's happening in the district, perhaps we revisit this each year, or, kind of look at it as we're moving along and perhaps add other resolutions to strengthen it. So I'm definitely in support of that. Amber?
I'd make I'd make a motion then to adopt the resolution as written.
Okay, so we'll just do that. And is there a second for that? I think everybody's seconding it. So any further discussion on the adoption of the anti-racism resolution? Okay, so we'll have, go ahead.
Yes, I quickly want to share my own story on this. Kate and Anaya's story there. So, when I was doing my master's, my thesis was on very large databases. Some of those concepts were actually used in what we now call big data. And I go to the lab one day at 10 o'clock at night because I was so enthusiastic to test my thesis. And the lab technician there looks at me and says, "What are you doing here? You should be at 7-Eleven." So I never felt so low in my life ever before. After when I came back, I was mature enough. I was 24-year-old. I brushed it off. I just did my job and came back. After I came back, you know what bothered me most? It's not that the lab technician talked to me like that and laughed about it. It was because the director of IT was sitting right next to him. He didn't laugh. He didn't say anything either. So when Anaya said she went to principals and counselors and nothing happened, that's when you lose confidence in your system. We should never, ever let that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your personal story. Any other discussion?
Yeah, this is Steve. I don't have a discussion other than to say that this is really a serious issue, and that we, by virtue of approving this, and I hope we do, begin a process that is going to be difficult, it's going to be problematic, that takes constant attention, because this is nothing new. Racism in this country is nothing new, and it started in 1619, and for us to take this on and begin the process of the change, we all have to understand how dedicated we have to be every day along the lines of what was just said, that you can't just turn around and walk away from it. When it exists, you have to react to it. And all I'm saying is that once we've taken on this charge, which I believe we will do, that throughout the entire school system, on every side of the question, needs to be a concentrated effort to make sure that we do gain, positive results from our interest. And therefore, that's why I have nothing to say except it's going to be a very difficult effort, and to do it right, we have to be dedicated to make it happen. So having said nothing, that's what I mean.
Thank you, Steve. And you were right. Lisa?
I just wanted, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Lisa.
This is Lisa. I just wanted to add, I guess, I want to go on record as saying I would like this to be an initiative throughout in our school system, so that it gets to be, our growth will be when anti-racism becomes part of our culture in all facets, whether it's the curriculum, through our teachers, through our students, and really as a community. Because we can do one without the other, but I think the impact will show itself. That we really need to educate everyone when it comes to these issues, because hearing the experiences of our town and students, really should give everyone pause to say we need to make change. And even though it's hard, we will do it. So that's all. Raghu?
Yeah, thanks. One more thing that I need to add is when I lost some self-esteem at that time, but I was mature enough to come back and do what I needed to do. But something like that, I'm sure, affects the self-esteem of a high school kid, a middle school kid, and I can't imagine that happening. Also, if we keep quiet, we are creating a bunch of people who turn out to be like these lab technicians. Is that what we want? We need to nip this in the bud. We need to cut this out right at, it should be, school should not just teach science, math, history. They should also be a character building place. If we don't do this, if we don't step up to the plate and take care of this as a community in our school, I don't know, we'd lose hope at that point. That's my thought.
Thank you. Yep, all part of our ongoing efforts. So why don't we do a roll call vote, and then we could have any final thoughts that we want to have on this anti-racism resolution. So we'll start with Sarah.
I was going to say, Dulay, yes. I will just add, thank everyone for coming tonight and starting this very powerful, moving conversation. And thank you, Raghu, for sharing your story as well. So I appreciate hearing everyone's voices.
Thank you. Raghu.
Nandan, yes.
Lisa.
Edinburgh, yes.
Steve.
Correct, yes.
And Vincent, yes. So that's 5-0 in approval of this. And I think I was thinking about what Raghu had said, and I feel like if it's not true for any one of us, it's not true for any of us as a group. So if one person is having some sort of negative experience or experiencing something because of the color of their skin or any type of difference, it is not right, and it is not, it ends up hurting the entire group. So it's not an isolated incident. Everything that happens is interconnected and interrelated. And we do a great job in Westborough of thinking of ourselves as a strong, healthy community. And in schools do an awesome job with thinking about us as a community and community building. And there's little classroom communities, and then there's the grade level community, and then there's the whole school community. And we want to make sure that everyone's a valued member of that. Amber, do you have any final thoughts?
No, thank you. Raghu, I'll include your story tomorrow amongst the messaging that's guiding our kind of personal opening of conversation, and we're using the voice of people that have reached out to us specifically so that it resonates as just the guiding feature. So I will speak to your story tomorrow. I think the timing of this works beautifully, that it's come forward at the opportunity where the citizens speak tonight, the other written documents that Ala brought forward from her group, all of them are starting to kind of gel around the goal being that your resolution is kind of a guiding beacon. All the detail flows into what we do with that strategic plan, where you get that granular level of accountability and detail, Raghu, that we talk about, like building up the layers of interaction need and getting that level of detail you spoke to when you started coming, like we need to enhance the documentation. I think the right place for it is around those actionable items that live in the strategic plan, from down to school, down to teacher, down to training, down to all those pieces, as well as our community education and outreach that lives beyond us, and working with our families and parents in a cohesive picture of taking on these discussions. So thank you. The resolution, I've already put the link to the resolution in tomorrow's document with leadership. So I'll start with the resolution, and then we'll move to stories, and then we'll ask ourselves the question, how do we use this? What actionable items do we have to have so that the resolution is enacted and the stories are fulfilled to the positive? So thank you very much. Timing is perfect.
I would, can I add in for a minute?
Yes, absolutely.
I want to say that you know, there are a number of people in the school system, including Amber and I, who have been deeply moved by the terrible events in our country. We were working on anti-racist kinds of issues prior to what's happened in the last several months, but we're redoubling our efforts. We've been, you know, several of our teachers and administrators have reached out to us. We have been talking about our curriculum already and ways to make sure that we revisit how we are presenting our history and social studies standards, starting from kindergarten on up. We were having discussions recently with the history department here about the 1619 project that they started to use in their curriculum this last year. And Nicole Hannah-Jones' recent article called "What is Owed?" that was on the cover of the New York Times Magazine section, that was extremely provocative about what is missing from our history books, and is often, you know, glossed over in the presenting of the history of this country. So I just think it's really important, especially given what I was saying to Ala earlier. I just want her to know that just because I was talking about those data points, I have no doubt that we have work to do, and we are completely committed to doing the best we can to make and see improvements in how we are in terms of issues of anti-racism and confronting racism that exists in our country.
I agree. And just one last piece, Daniel, you know, knowing that we probably have many faculty members watching tonight as well who are interested in the announcement of our preliminary planning, which we're going to move to next, I just want to speak to how quickly so many of them, and I offer this as both a recognition to what our faculty represents. They know they have work to do. They also are committed. This is a team that even underneath, you know, all of these stresses of what it's going to take to reopen, entered into a wide array of formed book groups for the summer to take on a whole array of really guided instruction with anti-racist text to self-reflect, because I think they really understand the charge at the deepest level, which is it's about our own individual personal biases and perspectives that have to be deeply reflected upon in order to shift our personal practice and our personal belief structures and our awareness, as well as all the other larger systematic things that have been mentioned in the call. But I think it speaks really deeply to our staff that they started with themselves. They were like, let's look at anti-bias practices, let's look at our own beliefs, let's self-reflect. And I will share with you when we return at some point the range of text and the number of participants. They're running second-tier book groups now. Administrative members are entering into that reading. And I offer it as just a small sampling that this is a district in the community that embraces, they're not backing away from saying we don't have work and we're fine, we've got a good curriculum. They're saying we do a lot right. We have many strong curriculum pieces that we celebrate, that many have talked about, and now we're ready to reflect and stretch even more. So I think Daniel said it spot on, that we're in for the work and we're excited.
Thank you. Yeah, it's all really great stuff to be focusing on now. And, you know, like you said, timing is everything. And thinking about this before we're entering into a school year and we're, you know, finalizing our next strategic plan and really making this a strong focal point there. So we look forward to hearing more about this and continuing on. And thank you all for sharing your thoughts and stories. We are going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to hear a financial update from Irene on grant funding for COVID-19 expenditures, and then we will get to the much anticipated opening plans for FY21. So Irene, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Irene, you're muted.
Okay, I'm there. I'm here.
That's okay. And Daniel, I think there's also a memo that you shared. Okay, great.
So, as you can imagine, there's been a lot of, you know, anticipation of PPE supplies that we've had to look for. The supply isn't there. We order the supplies and then they get canceled because the hospitals need them. But and then as we know the grants are coming in, then we're trying to track and try to maintain it and working with the town. So what I want to do is go over the grants with you. I hope I don't bore you, but the first grant is the FEMA grant, and that's a town submitted grant where these were the expenses that were primarily municipal expenses, such as the infrastructure expenses related to the COVID. There wasn't much that the school could qualify for. So we're still waiting to see if there's anything we can get back from that. The town submitted that. We did submit some food service personnel overtime when they were doing the grab bags and the deliveries and so forth for the breakfast and lunches, but we're still unsure if that's going to qualify. Then the next grant is the CARES Act, which is $1.6 million to the town. Now, this is a grant that's shared with both the town and the school department. We're anticipating that because this isn't as restricted as the FEMA grant, that we'll have a little bit more flexibility on what we're going to get reimbursed for the COVID-related expenses. We're still waiting for that. The town submitted on behalf of the town and the school up until, I believe it was June. And now we're going to do another submission, which we have to use until December 30th. So there is some movement that school districts want to be able to use these funds after December 30th, but that's still, you know, stay tuned on that. So for this one, this is more PPE related for the reopening of schools. And Kelly, I have to say, has really put in a lot of work searching a lot of vendors, trying to find masks, nursing gowns, gloves, different kinds of masks. You know, just today I was looking at one of the offices where the boxes were up to the ceiling just to keep them up there and make sure that we have a supply for the reopening of the school. So I have kudos to her. She's been just tremendous in that regard. And then we have the emergency relief grant. This is a district submitted grant. Daniel, you were the one that submitted this on behalf of the district for $80,519. And these are also COVID related, but this is primarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, but this is pretty much for gearing up for the reopening, the summer, kindergarten screening, the health and safety of faculty and staff, and professional development.
Yes,
Am I accurate with that?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, we have a lot of people who are working overtime hours during the summer to discuss all the procedures and plans that we need to put in place. And so that's what we're putting it towards. Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then we have the, I'm sorry, my throat is, remote learning technology, and that's one that John submitted. And this is for getting staff and students Wi-Fi, getting the supplies they need. If they do remote, the ones that don't have Chromebooks or, you know, just the Wi-Fi access and how we go about getting their access. So he's been active with this. This was just submitted. I don't know that we're going to get a whole lot of money out of this, but anything we can get, he submitted for. So this application was submitted on the 21st. So that was just yesterday. So we're still pending that. And then we have the what they call the CVRF school reopening grant. It's another one that the Baker Polito administration announced the allocation of approximately $200 million for the Commonwealth federal corona relief funds for costs related to reopening public schools. And, you know, we're eligible to receive $225 per student. We just got the information this past week on the guidelines on applying for this. The deadline for applying is August 31st. So we'll be applying for this. So we're actively working with the town on all of these applications and the logistics of how we're going to do the finances. The idea is that we'll have a dedicated account to the school for whatever our appropriation is. The only one that's questionable is the CARES Act, where 1.6, where we might have to work together, which is an unusual thing. We've never shared an account. So, but we did have a meeting with the town finance director and the town manager, Amber and I, and the thought is that most of that money will probably be allocated to the schools, but it's still up in the air. So we'll still, you know, we're all working to try to figure out, we're all coding expenses. We're trying to get supplies in as quickly as we can when we can get them. The supply is very difficult at times. So we just want to be prepared for the reopening. So that's
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Irene. And thank you so much to your staff for all the work they've been doing to track all of these expenses. I know it's tedious to keep track of all of this and to really search out and go after supplies that we would need to reopen and to support our staff and students. And I'm really also thankful to John Green for the application for the remote learning technology essentials, and specifically the internet Wi-Fi access that is really key for some success for many of our students. And so hopefully we can, you know, get some money for that and also continue to support our students in accessing any remote learning that we might be offering this year. Yeah, so thank you so much. And in understanding that this money is going back to the town and thinking about how that becomes part of the school budget or however that, is going to come into play. And I know that, we have a great working relationship with the town and just trying to figure all that out it's just a lot of moving pieces. And I appreciate everything you're doing to keep track of all of that.
Yeah, we made
Thank
a lot
you.
of headway. We had a great collaborative meeting with Leah and Christy, and I think the delineation of understanding what each grant is, getting the alignment of how we want to track the funds, and then directing the right funds to the right places. I think the challenges Irene is facing is that how the ordering comes in and how fragmented it is and when it comes in means that, getting them allocated to the right places is important. I think the CARES grant work will have good collaboration with the town. They need PPE gear, they need supplies, police, fire, town. That's a shared account, and I have confidence that the delineation there will be really appropriately shared across us and the community. And I think a working plan to do that is taking shape based upon what Irene said and the work she's doing with Leah. And then I would just indicate that as you look at that CVRF grant, the delineation of that as we look at that application will be really key. That's could be a meaningful amount of money. And I believe really when you look at that, it's going to have to fill the staffing gap questions towards reopening. And I will speak to that by the 12th when we meet, and we'll have a better idea by then. So to keep us moving tonight, I think financial questions, I think it'd be better for us to push forward and let's get into our report, just being
Sure.
our time. And then we'll return to this financial overview. And what we should do is start by forwarding questions to Kristen that surfaced from this memo. We kind of thought it starts a conversation if you need it. And then that shapes the next meeting's conversation and update on the grants. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Amber. And so we will move to the review of the proposed plans for opening school and starting the 2020-2021 school year. And I just want to acknowledge that as school committee members, we have received countless emails, phone calls, text messages from staff, parents, and caregivers sharing their opinions and thoughts on reopening plans. This is in addition to survey responses that we received. So we want to thank everyone for taking the time to express your thoughts. Every single one of your emails is read by us as school committee members. You've received a response from me or from one of our school committee members. And we continue to invite you to interact with us around this. So I'm going to turn it over to Amber.
Great. So let's just talk about process. We have a lot to cover tonight. And so what I think makes sense is Daniel and I talked this through. We'll share the report, Daniel and I, kind of going back and forth between the different portions. And as we step through it, I think we'll open up conversation by section so that you're interacting with us. We're breaking down the conversation. It helps keep you engaged in this format, as well as also giving us opportunities to keep the whole meeting moving forward with engaged conversations. So we'll move through. If we feel like we need to wait on a couple questions, we might say, let's hold till in, let's push into the next section. But I think we'll balance that with you to make sure, and Kristen, feel free to help engage in that as well with us to keep it moving. But we want to make sure we'll turn it over section by section to kind of take questions. I really want to begin by thanking the committees that are working, the extensive subcommittee groups, you guys as a team, the Board of Health, all of us looking at what is really just an unimaginable situation and thinking about how to provide public education for the Westborough public community. And I want to really begin by recognizing, before we dive down into looking at plans and talking about detail, that we know everyone is looking for information, you're looking for details, you're looking for reassurance. We recognize that, and what we want to do is have it accurately organized and correct when we send it to you, while we're also being inclusive in the planning process of our faculty. We respect and appreciate the support you've given us on the pacing by which we're coming out with things. And we hope tonight's first documents give you steps of more clarity, and there's more coming. I really also want to emphasize before we dive into this that I think the inclination when people are anxious about what model we're going to do and how we're going to come back, that one idea is used to negate the other. And I just want to ask all of us to recognize that none of us want to be developing these plans. All right, so these plans are going to represent what we believe from a wide constituency of input across the state, across the district, across the health groups that we can speak to, and from the feedback we're receiving, that we're doing the best we can to step forward with the decision that we think will provide the best Westborough experience that we can, with safety consideration and education in mind. We are all still mourning the loss of the Westborough school experience that we have spent our careers crafting for you, and that we are daily dedicated to. So you have faculty listening, you have families listening, but I want to begin by acknowledging that none of us wanted this. And we all have to recognize the losses, the concerns, and the anxieties. And so it means it has to be a joint effort as we continue to move forward. And so, you know, I think I understand that philosophically myself, but I struggle with it. And I just want to acknowledge that the quality of schooling we've crafted took us years and years and years and years to develop and takes constant maintenance. And here we are recreating something to open school under safety considerations. And I think everybody's just going to have to step forward with us a foot at a time as we figure it out. So with that said, I think we'll dive into the report. And I want to have Daniel take us into the introduction phase, and let's just begin. We're going to use the document itself to step through the discussion, and then we will be sending this document out tomorrow to faculty with a questionnaire and some follow-up from Labor Board and discussion, and Friday to families if we can't get to it faster, with some additional questions as well. So for families listening, more to come, and we are actually going to attach this section of the presentation tonight. Westborough TV is going to give it to us, and we'll push out this conversation in the link as well as the report. So anybody that misses it will get to link and hear our conversation tonight. So Daniel, why don't you take us forward?
Sure, thank you. So first, just to reiterate, this is a draft of a proposal that we're putting forward here. The state did not put out their guidelines until late June. So for the last 3 weeks, we've been working on putting this draft together. I'd give you the table of contents here and an outline so you can see where we're headed. I'm going to discuss the introduction right now. And then there's several different components to this report. One is discussing what are our options for returning in person as outlined by the state. What are the parent and staff feedback data look like that we've been getting? Our proposed plan for the fall. And then we want to talk about the state's requirement that we have a standalone remote learning program for families who choose not to, for medical reasons or otherwise, send their children back to the Westborough Public Schools for in-person schooling. We're going to talk about our safety protocols, some important calendar decisions that we need to make, and also supporting childcare decisions that and options we have for our faculty and some members of the community. And we're going to talk about some unknowns that are still that we need to develop and work on that are in progress, and some very time-sensitive next steps. So Amber and I will go back and forth. First of all, is it large enough for you to be viewing? Because I can't, when I'm in present mode, do you want me to increase?
I think you should enlarge it, Daniel, make it bigger.
Yeah, just a little bit bigger.
Go
Be more
bigger, and
helpful.
go bigger, and I'll tell you when you're there. Let's see. Yep, that's better.
That's good.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can you drop it text size and reduce the margins? You know, that'll add 10% to the size.
Yeah. So I did increase it quite a bit here, and so you should be able to see it, but there's a lot of text, so I'm just going to talk you through it. I'm sorry it's not a PowerPoint. We, you know, if we had more time, we would have be able to do that, but we have had other priorities right now in terms of being under the gun for so many different parts of this. The team of faculty and administrators that are working on this is extensive. As you know, we have close to 150 people giving us input along the way internally. So, and that these 3 bullets at the top here are really the sustaining relationships is critically important to us to be able to pull this off correctly. We need input from our from the community. We need input from our faculty. We need input from you. And then other priorities that are part of this plan is equity is front and center. The health and safety of our children and also our staff is imperative that we take that into consideration. The emotional wellness of everyone is critically important here. We have all been experiencing trauma in different ways, and we need to be cognizant of that. And then we need only when taking care of these other issues can we get to the robust learning. And so our outline here is basically the beginnings of what we need to do to submit to the state on July 31st, an initial plan. So we still have a little time before we submit the initial plan, and then the school committee gets to hear this plan in its draft form today, but then on the 12th of August, we will finalize the plan. We thought it imperative to get a draft plan out as quickly as we could so that parents and faculty could start thinking about what the fall will look like and preparing for it, at least as it looks currently with current COVID transmission rates. And so the state had given us in this document where there's a hyperlink here to their initial guidance, a charge to develop 3 models: a remote model in case we can't bring students back to work together in person, which is how we were in the spring, a hybrid model that allows us to bring up to 50% of our students in person in the building at any given day, and a full return model where all students would return to the school. So those are the 3 models, in addition to that standalone piece that I referred to earlier, which is separate from these 3 models. So now I'm going to turn it over to Amber to talk about returning into in person and tell us a little more about these models and how we anticipate going in and out of them in the course of the year.
Certainly. And so we've tried to be transparent about this in the communications that we have sent, that we fully anticipate that we're all moving forward with best entry plan. And then we've really tried to help our faculty and parents anticipate that we might well move through all modes during the year, working with you using benchmark data and the status of both Westborough, the state, and the nation to guide the decision-making for best instructional model. So we will step you through these, and I think it's important as we answer them to be thinking about your questions as well. So I'm going to give just a snapshot, recognizing that this is just a very small template for you of some of the key details, and it focuses on the kind of the construct of the design. The much more drilled down kind of instructional implementation pieces of this, building by building, and work is really still much more granular at the building level and at the level that the committees are working on now. For the purposes of letting people understand where each model sits, the full return is bringing back all students to classrooms, utilizing the 3-foot minimum distancing specified by the World Health Organization, by the Pediatric Association, and the other groups that we released in those earlier documents, indicating that across Massachusetts, they were entering into a willingness to look at this 3-foot minimum distancing with students in schools every day, asking us to look at doing a pressure treat where we look at like where classrooms could fit kids and what we would need to do differently. You've heard lots going on in the news and the media about renting spaces, spreading kids out across all sorts of classrooms, taking on the challenge of looking at a full return where you would utilize that 3-foot distancing and then all of the safety protocols necessary to do so. And the reasoning for that, I think, at a state level and across other places in the nation in some cases, is that we recognize that the most effective way for children to learn is to be with their teachers. We know that face-to-face instruction and the quality of what Westborough staff provide and what it takes to educate children is a personal, really upfront process, and that is the most effective teaching and learning. It is a model that takes care of children's mental health best because they're with us and we can respond to them and assess them. It provides maximum times for students to work face-to-face with teachers and peers. And it provides a structure for families to recognize the regularity of their schedule and to know how things are going to change and to get the best continuity of their stability in place as well. And that's not just to return parents to work, it's to return life to normalcy as much as it is to help families get back to income-based needs. It also recognizes that it's the hardest model to contain the transmission of COVID because the maintenance and the spacing and the challenges require a lot of planning and implementation scope that we're still really wanting to look through, and we are, to figure out the detail. Transportation costs also to bring those students back is also a question given the spacing of busings and would require some additional plans. And requiring extensive reconfiguration of spaces for spaces where we can't meet that 3-foot rule. So those are the challenges of that model, and these are the challenges, the pros, and the features that we've been using in our planning groups to map out each model. So our perspective is this is a model we might well use at some point as we progress through the trajectory of where we are with this illness this year. And so in looking at it, we want to understand how to implement it in Westborough. And those are the parameters under which we see the positives, negatives, and areas of concern. When you look at the hybrid model, again, takes into account the idea of basically dividing your school population by about 50%, looking to then lower the load on a class and on the buses and in the spaces of your building to about 50%. So you're between 9 to 12 students per classroom. It lets you better actualize the CDC guidance of the 6 feet distancing with opportunities to come closer together using the 3-foot guideline for aspects of instruction, all with the parameters of the guidelines put in place, and it brings students to school for 2 to 3 days a week, giving us that face time, the relationship, and the direct instruction that we need in order to move students forward. Looking at it, we see it as kind of second to 100% of face time where our teachers are able to do their craft with kids up front in our school buildings. It becomes the next most effective teaching model because it gives us time to have students working closely with us. It is definitely the next most effective model for taking care of children's mental health, again, because we get opportunity to see them up close, hear the conversations we can't have with them otherwise, provide some of that SEL and support training to them to take care of their resilience and their needs. It provides some face-to-face time with peers and for teachers. It provides a better quality of teaching and learning than being fully remote. To just start to deliver 100% of our curriculum, and I'll comment on that in a minute. Social distancing is easier, and the model provides opportunities for families to get a better kind of rotation of routine while letting children come back to school some. It provides opportunities for them to, I think the cons for it is we continue to face-to-face distancing, and that parents then have some challenging aspects of schedules, as do faculty, in managing, the life of like a rotation. And all of us then have to adhere to a schedule that has certain challenges. And lastly, we look at an all-remote model, which is a vision in which we've lived for the last 4 months. And I just want to begin to be explicit, and Daniel and I want to make sure we're clear about this. This model would be a return to all homeschooling. It's clearly the best model to maintain managing transmission of COVID-19. We all acknowledge that. It provides the challenges we said in that it's less effective for teaching and learning, for social emotional care, for families and faculty to be able to work from home and manage children from home while they're trying to do jobs. And the mental health becomes real issues for us of concern. It's a difficult model for all of us to maintain. And I think it's important for all of us who've lived in this model to recognize that we were covering a portion of curriculum for 3.5 months, as opposed to the recognition that the delivery of this model for a year or an extended amount of time needs to replicate much closer to the regular rigor of curriculum and the length of the school day, which becomes more and more challenging when you're in the remote model. And so, if we look at this as a permanent solution, it provides challenges that we have to think about we want people to understand, which is why we're commenting on them. The flexibility to be able to do remote learning becomes more complicated for both teachers and for families, as we need to increase the time and the intensity of curriculum and new content that would have to be covered completely remotely with students we haven't met in new student groupings. So those are the challenges of that model, and the areas in which we've been looking when we've been doing our planning. I want to say the compliment to the planning teams. They're taking each model, they're drilling down on it. These are the areas they've identified. We've kind of given them to you in a tight synopsis. They've really processed these in depth and need to do more work on them as they then think about how do we respond to those. So they've talked about them, they've looked at them, and now they're looking at how do you create a model to respond to those. So I think then the next question is, you know, based upon that, as we look at the big picture of all of those three models, we then turn towards how do we decide which one of them needs to guide our opening? And I would turn it back to Daniel in a minute. And Daniel, we decided we were going to process a little bit before we do each section.
Well,
so maybe
first I'm going to get into the parent and staff feedback, but before we do that, why don't we, I mean, are there some discussion, some questions that committee members would like to put forward about what we've presented thus far?
Yeah, I think it's a good stop and pause and questions. So why don't we open it up for discussion?
I mean, it could be that at this point it's all very, you know.
We're so clear, you're feeling, all right, it's fine.
I think there hasn't been any decisions.
I think a lot of us have been living these pros and cons for a while now. Once the state came out with the guidelines and said, develop these three plans, we've been living these pros and cons and thinking about that. And so I think it would be great to move on to some of the feedback that you've received, and then what, because this is like generally what the plans are and like what will look like in Westborough.
Sure. So I will then move into the parent and staff feedback that we've received. We, as you know, sent out a survey to the parents. No surprise that it is the most responded to survey that I've ever conducted. We have 1,980 responses, so on the parent data. So what is clear off the bat when you ask the question, which of these three models do you prefer? If you were given what you know today about COVID-19, which of these three would you prefer? Let me see if I've got a request to make this a little bigger.
So, you know, you could share your whole screen if you wanted to. Like, I don't know if there's another way to do the full present mode.
I think, well, let me see how Westborough TV is doing it, because there's something called Spotlight mode that Westborough TV, if you could kindly go into Spotlight mode and remove the school committee members from the side for the time being, that would be the most helpful. So right now there's I don't know if they're listening. There's a little bit of a lag. Excellent, Karen. Can you do that?
Oh, that's better, Daniel. That's much better. That's better.
Can you guys all see that? It's cut off on my screen.
Just there. That's perfect. Right there. Right there. That's good. That works, Daniel. Good job. Good job.
Excellent.
All right. Keep going.
So basically, so this pie chart here shows you very clearly that, you know, the community's split, right, in terms of where they're at. There's 27%, 28% that would like to, if you could choose, knowing what you know today, they would choose that remote model. There are 37% of our families that would, on the other extreme, say, let's go back, full return, 100%. And then there's 35% who are in favor of hybrid, and that's the partial return. And essentially, you know, if you take the 35 and the 37, you add them together, you're up at 72% of our families that support some kind of in-person return. And when we look at the staff data, we'll see a similar kind of pattern below. There's other data here that I'm just in the interest of time, I'll let people can read it on their own. I will say, however, that people immediately ask the question, does this vary by grade level? And the question is not really, okay? So it doesn't matter how old your kids are. It's basically the pattern out in the community is pretty much the same. There's some other questions here that are interesting to look at, but not as relevant for our purposes right now. The staff are similar to the parents in the sense that they're asked, their responses that they're given are somewhat different. And it says, I'm okay with this. I would be somewhat nervous about this. I would be extremely nervous about this. And I probably would not return in the fall are the options. And so you can see when the staff, there's 314 staff, are asked the question about whether or not, how they would feel about a full return. Close to 60% of our staff said they would be extremely nervous about this. And that's a very high percentage of the staff. And then you have only 13% saying they're okay with this, and 23% saying they would be somewhat nervous. And there's about, I think it's 15. I don't have, it doesn't have the percentage right there, but 10 or 15% who say they would probably not return. If we were to do the hybrid, you can see that the orange significantly reduces. So it's not negligible, though. Similar to the parents, there's still a substantial percent of our faculty that are extremely nervous about the hybrid model, whereas being somewhat nervous is at 44%, and being okay with it goes up to 21%. So that leads us into now our proposed plan. I'm assuming that the committee would like me to go in that direction, but I'll pause for a second if you want to know, if you want to ask any questions about the data.
Daniel, I just want to make a comment about the data and acknowledge something that I've heard from parents. A lot of them were reaching out and saying, can I change my answer on the survey? Because it says, given what you know today about COVID-19. And I feel like information and attitudes are shifting very quickly. And so what people thought a couple weeks ago is very different from today. And I can share a personal story. In June, I was attending the graduation parade and standing with friends and Westborough families and hearing things like, when are we getting these kids back to school? And what are you going to do to create plans to get these kids back in there? And let's get them back to school. To a couple weeks ago when people were like, we can't go back. I don't want to go back. I'm afraid to go back. So I feel like this data is a good representation, and also just acknowledging that attitudes change, sometimes fear can build, or so there's so much on social media, in the media, on the news about schools opening, reopening, data. It's a lot of information for people to take in, and I understand that people's feelings are a huge part of their decision making. So don't know if this data would change if we took the survey today, but just understanding that we're aware of that.
I think that it's an excellent point. We were cognizant of the fact that the survey did go out after the spiking started to happen, but it's gotten worse. And so, I mean, I did say we've internally talked about wanting to go out and survey again, in a couple of weeks. So, I mean, that's part of the story here that Amber was alluding to about going in and out of our models, perhaps. So, the rest of the country, there's some places where it's spiking. Massachusetts right now is okay. But yes, I totally get what you're saying.
So I just want to acknowledge a piece as we continue to move through the discussion. The plan that we have kind of roughly laid out, and you see it at the end when I put important next steps of information. I think that the survey data certainly wouldn't be unimportant. I think it's down to an individual family piece of information. We want that data. And so the next piece of communication, which will go out to families either by the end of today, late tomorrow, or early Friday, will be this report, again, resent. We're going to resend this out to everyone. So we'll send the link multiple times so you'll get it. So if you thought you couldn't read all of it tonight, it'll go out to faculty and families again. So you can digest it up close, take a look at it, spend your time kind of pushing around in all the links. But more importantly, we will be providing a link to families that ask some core questions, and I'll talk about those at the end. And I think we're down to the point where, based upon the information we provide in this report and the detail they can look at in the safety protocols, families, we actually want to get down to a name level on, like, yes, beyond a survey, the Smith family is planning on returning, and the Bach family is staying at home. So we really are going to move to that level pretty quickly, because that's what we need in order to get our last pieces of planning in place. So they are going to get surveyed real close. It's going to be.
I forgot about that. Yes,
I need your information back. So we're going to chase people. So I think from that standpoint, be assured that the granular level of request is coming, and their true feelings will be clear because they got to check a box. So I think that will help us move forward. And so how about if I take us into that next phase then, and I talk about the proposal and we keep our conversation moving forward?
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. So from Daniel's presentation on the data, I want to also recognize, and Daniel, you were going to take a moment and talk about, beyond just the parent feedback, I thought you were going to highlight a couple pieces, you can or I can, about the medical experts that we've been looking at researching. Did you put that in up here? I'm just looking. We're really looking at a wide array of, we're talking with other districts. We're talking with the state level. We have a weekly meeting with the commissioner. We're watching data. We're talking with, doctors. They're sending reports. We're looking at what the World Health Organization is saying, what the CDC is saying. We're tracking what MIA says they're thinking for athletics. Like, we're just watching all of the evolution, and then our responsiveness with staff and the planning groups we have, and just putting it into our best proposal coming forward. So from the standpoint of our proposal, it's garnered from everything we've looked at thus far, the planning we have in place, and the next best steps that we think help us move forward in our planning. So at this point, I would indicate that our leadership team is recommending, look at that, I'm going dark. No, I got to fix that. Don't go anywhere. I can't talk to you if that's going on with my face. Hold on.
We can't. Everybody's looking at the report, Amber. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We're all focused on the report.
Oh my God, I hate this. Sorry, I apologize.
Trying to save energy over there in the lights.
You guys, I just have to be able to laugh. We all have things we're surviving, right?
Well, yeah, I texted her during the meeting and I said, buy a death stamp, for crying out loud.
Into the work. We're looking at all of those pieces of this, and based on the recommendations of those transmission rates, the direction of Massachusetts, the opinion of experts, as I just said, we at this point are recommending that Westborough open in a hybrid model to start school, with a range of planning pieces in place that we want to spend the rest of this meeting discussing, that are detailed in our report as best first steps in planning. And I want to be clear that, we are not feeling that our first steps at all would be able to go towards a full return. We want more time to look at where we are when we return students and families and faculty to this life of schooling. We want to track our data. We want to train our protocols. We want to gain comfort. We want to get back in front of each other reasonably spaced. And so for us, kind of the whole range of that whole umbrella of considerations, I certainly would be in no way comfortable and would never recommend coming back all in. And came to that decision, working with all the things we've just said in terms of our current recommendation from this, just listening to our committee's work. We knew that we weren't comfortable starting there. And our data that Daniel just outlined. So we do believe, however, that in looking at the pros and cons, as we've detailed in that table up above, of the range of things that we are needing to grapple with, that returning in a hybrid model is what we're recommending for the start of school. And Daniel, if I hop in and out of forgetting pieces, just keep kibitzing in, please. The design of how we see implementing this model would be to develop a cohort where the hybrid approach will divide our students into two major cohorts of Navy and Cardinal.
I will hop in for 1 second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you even get into the cohorts, I do think that this part in the introductory paragraph about the importance of trying to bring our students back to establish bonds at the beginning of the year with their teachers is critically important. The transmission rates might go up, and we may well hit Massachusetts right now is at a low, and we want to keep it that way. Once it starts going up, we will, in all probability, need to close down. If those kids don't have a relationship at all with their teachers, it'll be a whole different ballgame to do remote learning than it was in the spring. And that's one of the reasons we want to try to push for a hybrid model at the beginning of the year here, is to at least get some, while the weather is still good and we don't have a resurgence happening in the state, some kind of creation of a relationship between the teachers and the students before having to go back into a remote situation.
No, thank you. And I think the last sentence there as well, people are recognizing and realizing across the industry, all of the superintendents and teachers and state people that we're looking at, and even in our planning groups, recognizing that we have not seen students for in-person instruction in 6 months. And the concerns around needing to assess their emotional and academic well-being are extensive. And in order to even guide our instructional planning and to form new bonded relationships, we need to get up close and see where we are. And I think that really is a very powerful driving feature of coming back in a hybrid model for in-person instruction. I think that if there's any humor to be had in any of this, we've changed the color names 8 times this week. And so because today we had settled on blue-green, and then we're like, wait, the middle school, Gibbons has a blue-green team, people are gonna be confused. So then we swapped it again. So you might even find in the report that there's a mix of blue and green and Navy and Cardinal. I think we fixed them all. But, Navy and Cardinal works as the 2 cohort groups. And so when we look at this concept-wise, we want to make sure that siblings are in the same cohort. We've been transparent about that in some of the preliminary early communications we've put out. Which days groups will go to school, is a debate that we've really tried to work through. And we've really come up with a plan that we think makes the most sense for us to have a good quality rotation for FaceTime and separation that allows us to do the distancing and the monitoring that we feel we need. We want to recognize that there's challenges in any design. We've talked again to our direct area and a range of other superintendents and what they're doing, what their designs are going to be. A vast, vast number across the region are coming back in a hybrid model. And they all have, varying kind of degrees of modification in it. We really want to look at the fact that across the bell curve of implementation for both older and younger students, if there was some group of some communities are looking at a week on and a week off. For a 5-year-old, that's a lifetime. Everything they learn one week, we have to start over again every week. It'd be like Groundhog Day. The rotation of a week away, the implementation of that quality provides a lot of challenges. And so when we looked at our rotation, we've picked one where we feel in an A-B rotation of every other day, and I'll look at the model a little further down with you in a graphic, provides us good continuity and some advantages for keeping a rhythm in teacher planning, for the cohort day home, follows a day where you were just with your teacher, where you get an opportunity to be working on work that's fresh off of instruction, which helps us to remove parents from direct instructors back to more modified support, which is a more natural role for them than trying to engage in direct instruction for new content, which is very challenging across a range of learning ages. So in looking at that, we moved towards a plan where we will have each cohort broken so that Cardinals will come, say, on Mondays and Wednesdays, and Navy would go on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they would each alternate a Friday. So it proposes for us.
Bring the visual up here.
Yeah, why don't you do that? One of the important pieces of this model is setting up a design where we are proposing either the vast majority or a substantial, if not all, of Fridays are a half day, where a student the student group of that day would come in for a half day, and the second half would allow us to regroup with faculty to get ready to prepare for their weekend preparation for the next week of hybrid work, to do PD and assessment kind of correlations. So when you look at this model, we're going to spend some time talking about this. We'll open it up for questions then. You see a delineation here of a Cardinal and a Navy cohort design. Monday, you have Cardinals in person in classrooms, socially distanced, and we're going to talk about what that looks like and what the implementation planning is. And then you have Navy at home working remotely on a full day of schooling that they need to implement with core curriculum in place that covers the curriculum of a more full year. The next day, cohort Cardinal comes off of a day with teachers and paras and special educators and specialists into their Tuesday at home remote day for a fuller day of instruction, many more hours of working, utilizing what they were learning from the day before. And at that time, then Navy rotates in, and we get into a rhythm of every other day model. And then on Friday, you see they every other week come in for the half day Friday, and we maintain that rotation. Gives us, I think, a design that allows us to focus on providing a meaningful at-home instructional time. With more robust capacity, students can carry home things that they did yesterday, a journal they need to work on, a text they need to do, a Socratic seminar they had the day before that they need to reflect on the next day, a lab they did on their in-day at the school that they need to write the report on, come into a cohort group with a set of students who are at home with them and engage in discussion around their lab. There's just a better vision and quality for what we can provide, because the charge across the state is to provide this all year long with quality instruction covering a year's worth of curriculum, with grading standards back in place and a much more robust model. So, when you start to picture that, the AB Day, we feel, provides both a picture for our faculties to understand how to interact with that planning, get the rhythm that they need, gives us a spacing in classrooms that we feel is manageable in terms of social distancing. And so it presents kind of that sense of overview. So I'm going to just skim through my notes here because I'm kind of talking.
How about, Amber, how about going into the piece about what the at-home, do you want to go into?
Yeah, let's skip down to that. So,
and then we'll back up to the pedagogy and the early release after this.
Thank you. So one of the important discussions that we want to make sure we have, because everybody's thinking about both faculty and families, what will my life look like in the fall? If I'm home with my children, if I'm at school, if my child's at school, what does this look like? And so I just want to clarify a couple key points on the hybrid, because it'll inform people's decisions about kind of their thinking about next year. The hybrid at home piece, we just want to clarify the differences here. The hybrid at home remote is a day at home that is a learning school day. It is not an off day. It is not a no school day. It is a school full day. It's following on the in-person instruction from the day before. Examples of this: independent work, built off the previous day. Some small group one-to-one instruction and learning with a paraeducator, a tutor, or other specialist teacher in small group settings provided virtually from those different groups. It will follow a schedule. It will outline work. It will provide opportunities for online work with the cohort group. Like I said, you were in a lab on Monday in class. You want to come home the next day and you're going to be in a small group virtual chemistry cohort discussion and lab preparation using Google Docs as an example. But it is a full school day of work. Work will count and be graded using Westborough standards of grading. We return towards a more typical report card structure that parents and families and transcripts are used to seeing. Examples of what it is not, and I think this is important as well for people to wrap their head around. We want to clarify kind of misunderstandings. It is not a remote plan that will use live casting from the classroom. So we're not trying to come at a hybrid model of instruction where we're acting like we're in school all the time when you're not. The bottom line is it's a hybrid blend where work done away is meaningfully planned against the face time you had. We're not trying to replicate the kids at home podcasting in and being able to televise the classroom. That is not in the parameter of this discussion for the way we see implementing a hybrid model. There's all sorts of tech problems with it. There's all sorts of distraction from focusing on the gold time of the kids you have in front of you to provide the most robust instructional time you can with them, those 12 students that you're in front of. And those at home will be working without their teacher that day. They might have, as I said, paraeducators, tutors, other people checking in small group, but the teacher's teaching the 12 in front of them for that high quality, intense face time. And it is not a day off from school. It is not a day supported by live virtual instruction from the classroom teacher. She or he is working with their kids on the building site, distance in the classroom, providing quality instruction. So I think as you vision that model, you need to understand that we will be sending students home with well scaffolded continuation of the instruction they did the day before. And
Amber, I'd like to add something.
Yep, hop in.
Yeah, so in anticipation of the high probability of being either in a hybrid or a remote learning situation, we have purchased for the year licenses for kindergarten through grade 6, some computer assisted instruction programs of the highest quality, both for math and literacy. Zern, that goes with our math program, and it works with Eureka, and then it's Lexia, which is a reading program. And both of those programs are tailored to individual students' learning level and keeps reports for the teachers to be able to examine in terms of where the students are excelling and can move forward and where there are deficits in their learning. So we think it's important, especially at those grade levels, that the public know that there's something built in there that's going to be extremely helpful for us from a teaching and learning standpoint. I mean, it's not meant to be that they're always going to be online. We don't want that, but it is a structured way to be able to get data back to us when they're working remotely on the days that they're not in front of their teachers.
And I think we're innovating. And again, I think that's news that, provides, information that's important for our faculty that are listening, as well as our families, that, we will make sure that day is an important, well-structured day. But I think given that we were in the hybrid model through the close of the year, the virtual at-home model through the close of the year, where you were getting those Zoom lessons and your teacher's doing the morning meeting, I just want to make sure that people can develop a picture. We're not calling students in for morning meeting. That's not the design of the model that we're developing. What we want is that the rhythm of that on and off time, that the teacher gets that high quality intensive instruction for the time that those students are with her or with him, and then home to do the other pieces the next day in some scaffolded support, as Daniel's just mentioned. And I think that, it gives us some really robust options to maximize the idea of, again, you're looking at introducing more new content without ever really getting the face time you need at 100%. That changes the intensity of what teachers have to prepare for, and then also, therefore, we want to support them more by giving them some additional tools. So I think before we move into, I'm just looking at what we've covered thus far, I think it feels meaningful now that we've articulated kind of a rough draft out loud of what the hybrid model that we're proposing would look like. And again, there's a whole layer of other pieces around protocols for implementation related to safety that we're going to talk about after this. You know, and give you kind of a picture, and then people need to really look at what's in the report up close.
You want to talk about the Fridays or not yet?
Why don't we talk about what that would look like, because it kind of echoes moving into the piece that comes after that, Daniel, just on kind of how else we're supporting faculty and families. Do you want to open? I feel like you're taking in a lot of information. Why don't we open it up? Go ahead.
No, either way. I mean, it does have to do, well, the Fridays have to do with the pedagogical approach, which we're in the middle of discussing. So.
All right, go for it. Then go.
All right, and then we'll have the whole package here. So, I mean, part of what we've been doing in preparing for this with our teams is reading the literature on, you know, how to effectively instruct in a hybrid environment and in a remote environment, and what we've been learning from those. From the literature is that you really need to adjust what it is the kids are working on, and that how the instruction is being delivered. And it's not just taking your instructional delivery that you would do if they're in front of you, and doing the same thing online or on a, you know, sort of like a self-directed piece of like assignment that they take home. So we studied a few different documents that are very influential in terms of our thinking. One is written by Justin Reich and Jal Mahata. Justin Reich is at MIT Teaching Systems Lab, and Jal Mahata is at Harvard Graduate School of Education, and they have a document that's called Imagining September. And one of the things that they make very pointedly clear is that there's a large body of evidence that's now available that shows that students, the average students, do less well than, you know, in an online environment. And when you're looking at average students or low achieving students, ethnic minorities, students experiencing poverty, all of them do not do as well in an online learning environment unless you adjust your instructional approach. And they in their document, Imagining September, they have some extremely useful ways of explaining what it is you need to do in terms of altering your pedagogy to make sure that you can keep those students engaged, whether they're learning on the computer or whether they're learning independently at home. And so we have had fantastic conversations with our faculty about it. And we also read a beginner's guide to shifting towards online and distance learning by John Spencer and Jal Giuliani, and they're also make the same points that, you know, you need to shift your pedagogy, and they have some wonderful examples of that too. And as does the a podcast where there was an interview that Jennifer Gonzalez did with a instructional technology expert who serves 19 school districts in Western New York, and it's 9 ways that online teaching should be different than face-to-face. And, you know, the point that is made in all of these is that there's a shift in pedagogical approach and a need for collaboration and systematic sort of work among the variety of adults that are working with the children to happen, so that we can provide the kind of vision that's in these documents. And, you know, I want to highlight this one quote that Reich and Mata put in, where they say in a pandemic with everyone teaching in potentially new situations, hybrid kind of at-home learning situations, creating the time and space for those kinds of collaborations between teachers is critical. Since inevitably some teachers, teacher teams and schools will figure out things that work faster than others. If we build in the structural space for this learning, we can get better much faster. They are arguing here for teachers having time to collaborate, to be able to figure out and share how things are working. And they're saying, conversely, if successful innovations remain localized, we have very little chance of adopting quickly enough to scale and create success. So key aspects of organizational learning include regular collaborative time to observe, reflect on, and iterate practice, and ways to network laterally across classrooms, teams, and schools to share emerging practice and learn from each other, and organizational responses that change the infrastructure to turn ongoing learning and emerging innovations into regular practice. Their compelling argument there is one that Amber and I both feel strongly about, and so do the faculty, that this is a heavy lift in terms of changing our pedagogy, and why part of this model here, you see this early release Friday. And we do have early releases on some Fridays, but we are respectfully asking that we have a half day on a substantially larger number of Fridays, if not all Fridays this year. And we think that is something that the committee needs to debate. And we definitely feel strongly that our teachers coming together on Fridays to think about the next week, to hone in on what it is that is working and what isn't, and generate and cross-fertilize their ideas with one another would be extremely beneficial to our kids. Amber? I think now we're ready to open it up. But
yeah, no, well said. I mean, I think that recognizing that professional development is an ongoing support to pull from. I think I want to reiterate again the quality of summer training, that teacher to teacher coursework that Daniel and teachers provided. I mean, Daniel just asked teachers, can you share? And they stepped up in droves and have provided really meaningful PD to each other around innovative teaching practices related to working more online. Really, really, really high quality stuff, as well as then these research tools around some of this documentation and some of these practices that we've been using in the planning committee, which we then want to roll out to providing opportunities for all faculty to talk about, to see in depth, and to kind of generate the kind of conversation that's brought, I think, positive energy to the planning that these groups are looking at. While they also, I want to acknowledge, positive energy around instructional planning and a recognition of things that can be exciting about that type of work, because they're such professional innovators, while they also, have a whole range of anxieties around the protocol implementations and things. So we have like these two emotional qualities riding together with a lot of intensity, as much for faculty, if not more, than for families. And so, I think we really have to recognize that the staff is looking deeply at this, both the protocols for safety, but quality instruction, because they are professionals who really thrive on that intellectual learning piece. And, I couldn't be happier with the direction of their planning work. So why don't we stop here? We've kind of given you kind of a pretty good scaffold on some pictures for what we think the hybrid implementation will look like in terms of instructional design and implementation. Why don't we open up the conversation?
Yeah, this is Raghu. Can I start?
Yeah.
I was thinking about this. So we have two groups, Cardinals and Navy, belonging to the same. Say it's important that we keep the instructions moving along at the pace that both are in sync at all times. So my thought process is, suppose you get a Thursday as a holiday, Thanksgiving, and one of the groups misses a instruction, just to keep pace with the other group, we can have that Friday as a full instructional day, and only on those exceptions and the rest I'm okay with having. I think it's important that they have professional days. So that's one of the ideas that I was looking around.
I think that's great. Well, I think we should gather all your feedback and certainly use it in our thinking. But I would say, Raghu, I want to acknowledge that faculty pick up on that type of stuff as well, because they're always envisioning the rotation of their planning curriculums. And I think, that's why our proposal to you is clear for significant, many, if not all, and that we need to look at the calendar and lay out the rotation of the AB structure, which we've already started doing. So we see that we'll produce clear color-coded calendars so people know what day they're on and how that works. And then we'll tweak some of those days to match the holidays so that we get a balance. I think that's kind of I think we'll see kind of what we'll kind of pick that apart.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that we'll work around those traditional Monday holidays and different religious holidays, and kind of make sure that if we have a 4-day week, we might as well just bring them all back for all 4 days and not implement a half day during that week. But I think on a traditional 5-day week, it makes sense to have that as a half day on a Friday. So Lisa, and then we'll go to Sarah.
So because we haven't gotten to the safety piece, if I were looking at this, I would be thinking to myself, oh my goodness, what about the cleaning protocols for a daily in building for our teachers and their safety? So I want to acknowledge that there's a piece coming later on about the deep cleaning protocol. So if you're listening and you're thinking that, I really think a lot of that is answered for how that will happen. But it would have been one of my first concerns. And the other part is, what I really like about this is it gives parents a very clear calendar for knowing exactly when they would need childcare for, I need it Monday, Wednesdays, alternating Fridays, or I have my calendar and these are the days I exactly need, versus it being the uncertainty. So I really appreciate that we're thinking about working parents, single parents, essential workers, people who really need to know exactly and when they need coverage for the remote learning days. So I appreciate that. Yep, that's all I have to say about that.
Hi, this is Sarah. Oh, sorry, Lisa, did I cut you off? Are you done? Okay. Just to be really, really clear, we're talking the same hours in a school day, right? It was implied that it was. Yeah, so the same hours, except for the Fridays, but just a regular school day.
Yep.
When they come to school, and then just with the half day, how would the half day Fridays affect time on learning? With our requirements for the state, I know they were looking at maybe not doing the full 180 days for professional development, things like that. So I don't know if that came into consideration at all.
Dan, you want to take that one? I mean, yeah, we'll have to answer.
Sure. I mean, I've seen, the majority of models that I've seen thus far have one day in the week that's the kids don't even come in. So I would say we've opted for a more in-person approach rather than a remote approach. And that one day they put in, and they call it a virtual learning day. But I think the state is going to look at our model very favorably.
I do think that the time and learning will be a piece, but I also think that they're recognizing the challenges placed on public education right now and are bending where they need to. I think that's where I'm sure we'll see that in the final proposal submission, that we have to check a box on something. So we'll manage that internally. Okay, no, that sounds great. I mean, I think that we should feel grateful to our, state and local leaders and our Board of Health and our community members for really, focusing on everyone's health and safety for the past few months so we could get to this point and come back to a hybrid model. So I think it feels good. Like Lisa said, we haven't gotten to the safety yet. I did have a chance to read this afternoon, so I know what's coming and I know it looks good, but hybrid feels good right now. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Steve, do you have anything you wanted to ask questions about or make comments about?
Yeah, I have some comments, and
great.
I think first of all, I was very surprised when I got to the Friday discussion in the report, because I thought it was a very clever solution to what was going to be a problem. And secondarily, the idea that it would be a half day so that teachers and their training could continue, I think is also very useful, particularly in this time of super stress for everybody. But one of the things that I did start to think about was this. As an engineer, I'm always interested in the bells and whistles of how things work. And so the hybrid model is based on the premise that, in fact, we're going to only have half the number of kids in school. And the reason for that is social distancing, so that we can maximize the space in any classroom, so that, in fact, the kids not only are separated from each other, but the density in the room itself obviously is less. So what's the critical story here? So we've now isolated half the kids from the other half of the kids by virtue of the scenario that we've just talked about. But the weak link in this system in terms of protection of the kids relative to spreads is the idea that we only have one teacher for both of those cohorts. And therefore, what I want to know is the mechanism by which we make sure that we've done the very best we can to know whether or not the teachers are okay, that the kids are okay, that in fact one doesn't create a problem for the other cohort, and all of those things, which is to me critical of the success of this program. And so I'm going to be very interested in how we actually set this up, not only to protect the teachers, but also to protect the kids at the same time. Because I believe that is the crux of this being successful. I have no problem with the fact that based on the study and effort that everybody's put in, that the curriculum will work, and that the time you'll put into it will be much more effective, perhaps, based on how successful we were, in the early part of this thing, and basically the fact that our teachers have always risen to the problems and the occasions to do what's necessary. But we as a school committee, we as a town, we as a school district need to make sure that the protections that we put in there for both the kids and the teachers is going to work to the utmost, because that is where the success of this program turns. So I'm glad to hear that others have seen the safety part of the program, but I'm very interested to see what it's going to be. And so, and going back to the discussion that you had in the midpoint of this thing in terms of what the data out there from World Survey of the way things are working with this particular virus, I have no doubt that social distancing for the kids, and if we do the proper things, in the school building, knowing that the infection rate in the Commonwealth as of today is somewhat less than 2%, that means only 2 people of 100 today would have this thing. And if we can keep track of all these people who may have it based on what the state is doing, and I believe additional testing to make sure that we know the teachers don't have it either, then this will be a successful program. And I think our success to make sure that the parents feel that their kids are in a safe environment turns on the answers to what I just put out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, important points, definitely, in the back of everyone's mind as we move forward and creating these plans. And just a few thoughts I had on the hybrid model, that I think starting in person and developing those relationships is super important. If we have to move to distance learning and have the entire district at home, forming those relationships is critical. So having the every other day model, you can form those relationships much more quickly. Also, just thinking in a practical sense, having an every other day model gives everyone, like the students, a break from wearing the mask all day. If we were doing like a 1 week on, a 1 week off, you're not going to build you're going to have a whole week. And so you're going to get like just fatigue from doing that. And then you will lose a tolerance for it on the off week and have to start all over again. And so this AB model can help us get into a routine and a groove with masks and other routines and protocols much more faster, so that we don't lose out on those routines as we rotate in and out of school. And the half days on Fridays, I'm in full support of that. I think our staff needs time to collaborate with each other. I want them to participate in more professional development. They're eager to do that. And I know our teachers want to do the best and do the best for our students. And they are eager to learn what is the best way to educate them in these new times of teaching. And they need time for support, to support each other, and to have time just to focus in on what it is that they're doing, and also do some self-reflection and self-assessment on, like, is this effective? Is this working? Which I know, Amber, it's something you have built into this plan, which are kind of benchmarks for thinking about, is this effective, and when might we need to switch to a different plan? So just to be clear, that the hybrid model is a full return to full curriculum, full learning, 5 days a week. And I had a question about the at-home days. Daniel, would you say that's more like an ALD model of learning? Like that the student is, a lot of responsibility is on them to continue the learning with some parent support? Or is it going to be, I mean, it'd probably be more than what an ALD day provided, but kind of like that independent, find your links or take home your work and work on that during the day.
Yeah, it would be, but it would be, there are two, you know, when you think of ALD, there's like the ALD model that was for snow days, where the curriculum wasn't necessarily as tightly linked to the prior day's learning, and then the spring, where we were working remotely all the time. I would think that the students going home would have a much clearer concept of, because of virtue of the fact that the day before they were with their teacher, of what it is that they need to be working on and how to do it and how to approach it. And so they would be somewhat more independent than they were in the spring in terms of being able to do their work.
Great. Yep, that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think it also allows us for the rotation of materials, for feedback follow-up, that it removes, you know, a teacher can give feedback the next day. For example, if you think about if a student's working at home on their remote work, you've got follow-up the next day, so your feedback doesn't have to be then done online. And so it also streamlines, again, some of those pieces that are really cumbersome when you're trying to do all of it online. So I think those are things we've considered. I just want to note a couple of things, and we're going to move into the safety work here in a second, because I think that we want to keep ourselves moving. Can we do that and then come circle back? Are you confident we could kind of step forward? I know cognizant of people watching, wanting us to kind of keep moving.
Yeah, I think we have to think about the standalone remote learning program and then the safety.
Yep. So go ahead, Daniel. I'm hopping back to you.
I will. First, let me just switch my screen. Okay. Okay. So as I mentioned at the beginning, that the state has required that school districts create a standalone remote program for families to support children who can't come and attend our hybrid or in-person models. And right now we are still in the process of developing, what we're calling it is the Westborough Standalone Remote Learning Program, WSRLP. So we're still developing it and anticipating having more details in the next few weeks. It's an unfunded mandate like we've never seen before, and we're going to do the best job we can do to try to do this. We are talking with colleagues across the state and in particular our surrounding school districts, who are having a similar feeling of we need time to develop this, to figure it out. But this is the three options that we've come up with so far. Is one is the option of potentially staffing this model with teachers who, because of medical reasons, cannot return to in-person teaching. Under this option, while it's a concept that the commissioner has suggested, we may or may not have enough teachers or properly certified teachers to staff that. One could imagine at the high school in particular and the middle school, where you have to have specialists in different areas, that you don't have teachers who are going to be at home from all the different subject areas. It will also put a burden on the school district just financially that we have to deal with, but that's a separate discussion, because if we're paying those teachers to work from home, we're also having to hire subs to work for them in the schools. Option 2 is to use an online curriculum and a learning platform created by a third party. Several school districts are exploring virtual VHS learning, Edgenuity, Edmentum. We have VHS at the high school, and it is, while a solid program, the costs are formidable. Our estimates is $250,000 for 95 students. We don't know what the rate of non-participation is going to be, or the rate of participation in this program, but we will have more details on that soon. But if it's 20%, the high school, that'd be close to 240 students. So option 3 would be to create a shared, robust kind of standalone remote learning program that would be run by Westborough and Shrewsbury, Hopkinton, Northborough, Southborough, and Grafton, pooling our teachers who are on medical, working from home because of medical reasons. And that might solve the problem of not having enough licensed teachers to teach in all the areas that we would need. So all kinds of logistical hurdles in terms of figuring that one out. It's the most appealing to me in some ways, because it would allow us to, a higher probability of having quality teachers, enough licensed quality teachers to be able to help the children from our various districts that are in this situation. But it does, require it involves, we need somebody to organize it. So you would need somebody full-time to actually basically be a coordinator. It's like creating a school, a K through 12 learning school. Like I said, if we have 20% of our district out of 4,000 students, that's a lot of kids. And that's the going estimate is 15 to 20% might not participate in coming back to school. So we would need a full-time person to coordinate it, and then we would need to get agreements signed, with our unions and the school districts need to work together. The superintendents need to talk quickly about whether that's an option, and school committees would need to be involved too. So you see the level of complication of trying to do this, but we are up for the task of trying to do something that will be as high quality as we can pull off in the next couple of weeks, pulling something together. So
thank you. That is, I call it the 4th plan, because the state has us developing 3 plans and then said, oh, by the way, if students cannot return or parents are given the choice to not have their students come back, then you still have to continue to educate them. And so, and it's an unfunded mandate, and these options all seem feasible. It's trying to either find the money to do it or the coordination to do it, or both. But I just want to be clear, based on some information that I've heard from families, that if your child does not return and our school district is still educating them, this is not the remote learning that you had in the spring. This is a separate program. It will look separate. It will feel separate, and you will not have daily interaction with a teacher. I don't think, it doesn't seem like you would have daily interaction with a teacher. But you would have work, and we would try to, align it with the benchmarks of Westborough Public Schools, and you'd have a teacher, assessing work and grading and things like that. But it is not the online learning that we had in the spring, because our teachers are in the classroom teaching and learning the students that are there. So I find this one of the most challenging parts of this, to figure this out. And I appreciate the creativity that you've put into some of these options, particularly partnering with communities around us who have similar expectations and similar similar benchmarks for achievement that I feel like we could partner really well with those districts. This is challenging, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So I know that there's probably more discussion to be had on that model, but because we're not putting a very concrete proposal in front of you yet, other than to recognize the pieces that we have to get accomplished, can we move forward through that? I really want to get to the safety protocols and discuss.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
thank you.
a couple key pieces that I want to highlight. We know that faculty and families need as close to a granular level of detail as we can provide around safety protocols in order to plan and prepare so that they can create a picture for their return to school and to understand what they feel are the appropriate levels of safety, and echoing some of the content around Steve and what you guys have all said. We believe that the safety protocol as it's currently written is very detailed. You can't let the detail overwhelm you. You have to spend some time immersing yourself in this document, but you can see the planning pieces that it provides to you and the parameters that we're going to utilize. And it gives you, I hope, what I think is the most important picture for opening, kind of a sense about how we're going to manage the current status of, providing public education in the setting where there's illness. And I think it does provide that picture. You're going to need, beyond my description now, you're going to have to look at the document that comes to you tomorrow and spend some time with it. Our view is that's where you should put your energy, because instruction is going to happen wherever you go. And I believe that's probably secondary to most people against their sense of wellness around whether or not they feel comfortable returning their child. And so this is why this is the most detailed part of this document, a place for you to start to kind of develop that picture. We're continuing. I think it's very, very important to recognize that we've said this multiple times. I'm going to say it one more time. We are not making these procedures up. We are working with the guidelines and procedures outlined by the CDC, the World Health Organization, the Mass Department of Education, the Department of Public Health, our Board of Health, all of the physicians, the pediatric guidance that's been given, the whole range. We're kind of looking at all of it and using it to set our guidelines. That said, I also want to recognize that, in no capacity have I ever lived in a world doing anything we've managed either as an individual in my own personal life or in work where we can provide 100% guarantee on anything. And so I think it's important to realize that we believe that we've developed a strong set of mitigating strategies that greatly reduce the risk of infection. And if there's one thing we've learned is that we've got to be vigilant, we have to be flexible, and we have to care for one another. So, those words are directly in this safety report. You'll see them. They're written by that team that did the drafting of this, because we believe we want everyone to understand that, of course, like, we're walking these buildings, we're folding our faculty in, we're folding our community in here. We all feel an immense responsibility. And I just want to recognize that I feel like it's a sound document using what we've gotten from experts. So when we look at that, I think the piece we want to understand is in looking at the general protocols, I'm going to have Daniel open the document a little bit, and I want to then have you, Daniel. I'm trying to think about how to best do this. The protocols lay out a detailed document, and actually I should probably open it so I can read it up close. I apologize. So, one more second here. The committee has looked at protocols implementing across, there's application for all models, and then there's applications for individual models, kind of like requirements to be at 3 feet, requirements to try to do all return, requirements to do hybrid. We've kind of looked at a comprehensive, what is our general approach going to be to safety guidelines that work across all models? And you can see the team of people that worked on this, and actually on Monday, this draft of all the safety procedures are going back to our planning committees and letting them look at it in depth and apply it to the ideas that they've been surfacing and the questions that they've been using to guide their planning. And then they'll interact with us and give us feedback. You'll give us feedback. People that get it in the public level will give us feedback, and we'll use that to kind of make refinements. It has, and as we look at this, it gives all sorts of background and context for all of the guidelines provided by the organizations that I just outlined to you. And we give links to their reopening guidelines kind of all in one place so you can see those expectations. It gives us protocols for managing a dashboard of data so we can kind of think about reporting to you. It gives us procedures for how to manage if there is a case at a building in a classroom, and all of those kind of pieces. It looks at, for example, as we scroll through this, it begins by, and it's organized in a couple pieces as you go through this. First, it looks at what's the background and context for our plan to reopen. Lovely. From I'm just gonna like put my camera off because it makes me crazy while I talk here. It's the sorry, that totally blew my train of thinking here for a second. It provides the details for the context for reopening is provided first, kind of a defense for the appropriate reasoning to reopening, which we've kind of looked at all those guidelines. Then it looks at how the disease spreads and provides some reminders to people with a graphic and some additional detail. And then it looks at an overview of the 4 areas of guidelines that we drill down on, which is on, Daniel, I guess what page that is. It's page 3 of the 11. There we go. It focuses on staffing and operations that I'm going to take you through these and then you have to look at the detail on them. It provides staffing and operations, which is training for staff and students and faculty and staff on protocols. It provides staff and students who display symptoms that they will not report to work or school. It outlines the ways in which WPS will establish protocols for when a staff member or student becomes ill, and it provides specific criteria for a return to work established for both for faculty and then also a return for students. So under staffing and operations, we have protocol details on all 4 of those enclosed in this document. Next, the overview provides guidelines for physical distancing. We will provide, again, then training and staffing for students on physical distancing. We will provide for staff and students the guideline that all will wear masks and face coverings. We provide guidelines around our anticipated goals for signage and physical safety distancing throughout the school buildings. If it requires marking stair transitions and door entrances and different types of things we've seen as we've all moved in and out of different settings as the state has moved through phase 1 and 2 of reopening. All of those guidelines implemented. It gives the implementation pictures for how we anticipate doing that physical distancing. Faculty, adults will remain at least 6 feet apart from one another to the greatest extent possible, and students will remain at least 3 feet, heading for 6 now within our hybrid model, wearing a mask and at least 6 feet apart from one another when not wearing masks, such as around some procedures around lunch and recess and mask breaks. So I just want to take a second before we dive into even more detail around these. Around the physical distancing, hold on just a second. Daniel, can you read through what's included in C and D while I cue my lights, and then I'll come back.
Sure. Yeah, so the hygiene protocols, like the other areas, there's specific training for staff and students on those protocols. There's hand washing and hand sanitizing stations that will be available, and the expectations around when that's the hand washing and sanitization supposed to occur. And our staff is trained to regularly sanitize the high touch areas such as doorknobs and bathrooms routinely throughout the day. And then under cleaning and disinfecting.
Yeah, I can pick up from here. Sorry.
Okay.
I feel bad to dump that on you.
Okay.
The protocols for hygiene and protocols, the state guidelines are very specific, and now we're at the building level of implementation for where we would place hand sanitizer.
I did the, yeah, but okay.
And what types of things would be in classrooms, and what the daily protocols are for our custodial teams, and the behaviors for students as they back out at the end of the day, and expectations for faculty to be able to clean their own materials and things within reason, all outlined in the protocols of hygiene. And then the cleaning and disinfecting, we have a very strong custodial team for disinfecting. Kelly Giacopello, our assistant buildings and grounds, was a hospital trained coordinator in management of cleanliness and protocol guidelines, and she's bringing all of that expertise to us now. She's taken point on purchasing all of our PPE and types of things. And I'm going to then, we're going to step you through these things in just a minute. And all those protocols, I feel really strongly, between the ionized misting and the touch point cleaning at night and the good filter containment work with our HVAC systems, all of that stuff just part of a protocol work, which we're embracing and preparing with details. So I just want to, before we step in and mention, say, you know, we're all benchmarking how to implement this and then refine the details. We gathered today together for our retreat in a socially distanced planned gathering, and utilized the model package of materials that we anticipate providing to every staff member in the district. And that's inclusive of assistants, Forbes staff, para educators, custodial team, and teaching staff and tutors. We looked at the case of the bag of protocol supplies, a face shield provided for selective use in different settings or all the time, based upon teacher choice of comfort, and in times guided by our protocols. A clear face mask provided, and then some disposable masks available to a teacher to pull as needed, and then gloves and other types of sanitary things available to them. So every faculty member gets kind of prepared materials and provides then a protocol for that use and general guidelines. We met today and kind of implemented those to get a feel for them, talked through the protocols, explored kind of mask use protocols and what we were comfortable with. If we stepped outside for socially distant circle group meetings, we stood at 6+ feet, and, you know, we're able to lower masks, interact, and then just kind of learn the range of protocols that we see using to return to school with our own faculty and students. So if we scroll down here to the area, I'm going to talk in detail around kind of each of these 4 areas, and I'm going to give you then some of these guidelines. I'm going to move a little quickly because we're not going to be here reading this into this 11-page dense document. And then there are links where you can go in and see the protocols for if there's a case, what the process is, what the returns are. I'm going to leave people to look at that independently because it's all detailed, and I want to make sure that people can read it. You certainly can then forward questions to us. This is a draft, it's our beginning, and it's to show you the time and care we've put into being prepared to bring back a hybrid return. So prior to the opening of school, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, and how we'll achieve this, school will reopen with all staff participating in training and health safety protocols. During those first day of school, students will then be trained, and we will all work together in the first several weeks of school. We will be guiding teachers about how to do this new implementation, to train everybody to live in that new normal in a way that we feel comfortably we're implementing with safety protocols in place. We all want to understand the terminology of what COVID infection looks like. There's processes for what it means to quarantine, to isolate, and to what close contact means. It's all included in this document. And again, there's a form that families will sign and faculty sign that's attached here for review that just indicates that here are the things you know you can check the box on. We've seen this in many kind of different work settings that say that you feel confident that your child or that you as a faculty member can return, you know, effectively based upon your exposures. And that's an example of a form that we might use. While specific protocols will vary at the building level based upon the need to be more granular in aspects of implementation, like which doors we close, which doors are open, down at that level, at the building level. There are some well kind of specified protocols that will be overarching, which is we will be evaluating symptoms. We will separate from others if there's a case. We will clean and disinfect spaces visited by the person. So you can see those protocols as well. So there's kind of overarching protocols and then detailed kind of drill down by building based upon you need a space where a faculty member or student goes if we have any concerns that they might be ill. And so, you know, there's a whole separation protocol. It's all detailed in the additional document. Okay. If you scroll down to 6 and 7 there, that's the quick reference that I'm referring to. And it's not really quick. It's pretty in depth. And I'm going to let you look at those, but it outlines the protocols for each item of concern that the state has detailed, and then what our procedures are. And it also details Westborough's specific procedures in there. I'm going to give you one sample of where we varied because we looked at it up closely. We didn't just put the document in there and say we're going to do it. We've gone through it piece by piece, this safety committee. For example, one of the protocols is that the state guidelines say that if a student might be symptomatic and has been sent down and is in the isolation space and the nurse has seen them and they need to be sent home, maybe they've been exposed to someone at home, and so the protocol is you bring them down, they should go home. But if there was an at-home case and they might have had an exposure, it's not even confirmed. The guideline from the state is that as long as they wear a mask, they can remain in school. Westborough's preference is that that student go down to the nurse, they go to the isolation, we gather them what they need to head home, and they head home. So we're using a dismissal procedure on those cases. So I feel like we've talked about, so for families and faculty, as you open that dense document in 6 and 7 there, and you look at those, we've really, the committee that worked on this went in depth. Judy Noonan, our nurse leader, a whole variety of people really looked at all of these protocols and validated, yes, we will implement these or we will modify them as such. And there's a table in there that lets you interact with the ways we're changing that. I'm going to keep moving a little bit here. Physical distancing. We will do all the things we said with regard to training. Visitors to school will not be permitted unless they have an appointment or it's urgent. We will be managing, limiting those entries. We have plans there for visitors and how we'll manage that. Personal protective gear, you've heard me say we will be providing to staff, and it says in a detail there what's being provided. Students are expected to come to school with a family purchased mask. We will have masks for backup. We will have masks on bus for backup. No student will enter the school without a mask. We fully expect that everything we've learned about the transmission of this is that really the highest, most well-controlled way to negate transmission is to wear a mask. And so our protocols look at a strong confidence that we can do pre-K to 22 for mask wearing. We have a lot of confidence in our ability to have our students work on that. We've seen that students as young as 3 that have interacted with us for different types of things, and some who've come in for up close 1-to-1 in our summer school are capable of really managing that. They might require more mask breaks, and we'll plan for that, but our protocol is stepping up the expectation that that is a core procedure, is our goal for opening. And then there's information in there that the face covering on the bus, and I've already mentioned that. And that even if you carpool or come on foot, you should be wearing a mask when you enter school grounds. Okay. Offices and work setup, the same, managing, giving our greeting staff either some type of a shield, a large shield, although we are not leveraging plexiglass because it is not fire coded for entrance into our buildings. So working collaboratively with the town, we're going more for the face shield work. We will have some selective use of screens, but they're not like heavily folding into the building until we are clear that they meet the protocols for safety for fire guidelines. Classroom setups as per DSC, we will hit the between 3 and 6 feet minimums. Student desks will be assigned and labeled, and teacher desks will have a minimum of 6 feet distance from the first student that they're designated to interact with. All those protocols are outlined and I think speak to the level of detailed planning you've done. Common area setup, hallways, staircases, auditoriums, cafeterias. There's detailed protocols there for how we'll manage all those. Those become more individual by building, managing doors, managing entrance, all of that. And I'll leave that to both people to skim and look at so they understand it. Lunch protocols, cafeteria standards, all will be managed following, CDC guidelines and building-based implementation to safely allow students to have lunch and faculty to have lunch. To provide a breakfast program as a grab-and-go bag as needed so that we can meet the needs of what our families and faculty need. Nurses' offices have a much stricter protocol of gear, much more follows kind of almost hospital-based level of glove removal and swap out after every visit, all the protocols that kind of meet the hospital grade level of interaction and checkpoints for nurse safety protocols, an isolation room available, special ed guidance, all of those are all detailed. You'll see there's a couple that are still highlighted because the committee is still waiting. We're still waiting for some guidance protocols from the state, but we're also waiting to finish some more detail on those. Arrival and departure will be managed, and all of that's outlined. Minimum cohort switching when possible, pre-K to 3, they will remain in rooms and specialists will come to them so they're not moving through the hallways too much. A lot of limiting of movement. 4 to 6 remaining with their team or their classmates when possible, and 9 to 12 exploring scheduled transitions to limit students in the hallway, contact when feasible, and to kind of have reasonable limitations to the ways that we all have to interact. New habits will be formed with all of us working within age-appropriate guidelines. And then we have hygiene protocols that relate to hand washing. Those guidelines are outlined. Actually, better than gloves, they've been clear that a balance of hand washing and sanitizing, and the sanitizing and hand washing can be interspersed to work effectively to move students through those routines quickly, but they have targeted times during the day when the expectation will be that they need to have a kind of like, there's 4 general kind of opportunities during the day where there's like very targeted opportunities where everybody has to wash or sanitize. And the protocols for that at a classroom level will be outlined based upon age and teacher and building level principals. Fountains will be closed. All that type of stuff is outlined. It's very detailed. You can look through it as a family and have a picture for what we're developing. Building ventilation, we have our HVAC systems are very well maintained. Bill Gavarino, I want to give a shout out to him and our Buildings and Grounds Committee. Steve Jarrett as a school committee member who's always taking care of the ventilation, HVAC monitoring and his duties. We are meeting the benchmarks of guidelines within the range where they give us some flexibility. We need to take it based upon equipment, and they've been very clear it's guidelines when possible. We feel very good about the fresh air flow coming into the majority of our buildings. We will, in our final report, have for you just the benchmarks we're targeting for air circulation rotation that meets, I think the CDC expectations, as well as additional filters that our system can manage that meet the goals of the CDC as well. Cleaning and disinfecting, I'm not going to go into depth now. We do that very, very well. Bathrooms, fixtures, door handles, entry and exit touch points will be a high focus by our custodial teams. Restrooms, administrative offices, cafeteria areas, all managed by our custodial staff with a set of protocols. Again, we use that ionized mister, which kills a high rate of infection rate at night in rooms. We can run it between lunch cycles. We can, we can manage it as a tool and have a plan to do so. Other topics of importance, we're waiting on action on fine arts, athletics, transportation is in good place, but we need to finalize the splits of hybrid to check to make sure that our busing is working well. So that's a pretty in-depth report. And I think that if you utilize the links and you click on them, you're going to get a whole drill down into the procedures that give you a better picture even at every level of implementation. As a snapshot, they're thinking about the doors are propped open, students come off the bus, they space off the bus, they come through the doors, they don't have to touch the doors, they get down to their room, they have sanitation, they come in, they sanitize right away, they have a protocol, they go to their desks, they kind of start their morning routine at their desk, masks on, transitions managed, minimum touch points touched. All of that's part of just kind of an implementation procedure that the planning teams are kind of wrapping their head around. And then the admin team drilling down really intensely to relieve that burden from teachers. They're thinking about instruction, putting that stuff back in front of them, saying, here's how we're going to run lunches. How does this look? Give us feedback. So that's kind of where we are in that type of planning. All right. I want to talk about two important things. And I'm wondering, you guys, given the time, and I worry about teachers backing out of the meeting maybe because it's late and they've got things to deal with, and families. I'd like to skip down and talk briefly, Kristen, if you'll allow, about daycare plan we have in place that I want to announce and think about for our faculty and some of our families, and then also the schedule calendar. Then we can go back and open up conversation on all of that. And then Daniel,
Yes.
special education, its content is there, but I think right now for the urgency of timing, I would direct us, Kristen, that feels the best plan.
Yeah, that does feel like the best plan, is not to minimize at all the special education services that we will work to provide in our school district and that we will do. And there's a huge section on that with links. And so I encourage families to look at that planning as well. But I do think we need to look at calendar decisions, supporting childcare, because that's really going to help inform parents in making their decisions.
Right.
So let's talk to that.
So let's talk to that. And I also think that the depth of discussion that we're going to have is one piece of this, but people need to look at the document and interact with it. You're going to get email, and that's going to guide the best conversations we have. So if we come down to two things, in order to continue to support this planning model, and looking at the feedback that we have received from faculty and families, trying to look at picturing their lives as they enter into return to the school year, both as faculty and as parents, and then also as parents and as working people. So, all of these pieces together. We have made some organizational decisions to support faculty, staff, and families. And importantly, for us, we have planned the calendar such that Monday, August 31st through Friday, September 4th will be faculty and staff days. So students will return for the first day of the start of the hybrid rotation on Tuesday, September 8th. That gives us a week of interactive training. And the way it's going to break out is first several days is all about taking care of our staff, bringing them in, letting them see each other, setting up our meeting structures, letting them experience protocols, letting them get into their spaces, taking care of their needs intensively across the first 3 days. And then part of that third day and into days 4 and 5, thinking about how we then care and re-enter with our students. And so you need a week to do that because we have to start with our faculty first. They haven't been in buildings in a long time. They need to come back in. They need to learn these protocols. They need to do their training. We need face-to-face time to assess their wellness and readiness. And then we work on students the second half of the week. And then they leave for a long weekend for themselves to have some emotional downtime, and students will return on the first start of the hybrid rotation. I think it's Navy or Cardinal. One of them will begin that day and start coming to school. The second important piece of that for us, and so that's an important announcement for families and people to plan. The second announcement is that one of the pieces that we've really been trying to work on considering, and we will discuss the contract for this in executive session, and I hope to finalize it with you tonight, is that Westborough Community Education has very much really stepped up, and that program is finalizing a contract right now to lease a large local space that will allow for us to safely care for 250 students, to provide a program that will run Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 4, for students in grades K to 6, with a 4-year-old allowable program for faculty members' children. Priority will be given for the first slots to all faculty. This is to provide reassurance to our staff that they can focus on Westborough children because we're going to take care of their children. And on the days when their children might well be in a hybrid model in another community that doesn't match theirs and they need appropriate coverage in order to come and focus on a hybrid model of instruction, we will provide childcare for them in a setting that's very cost effective for them and allow them the priority to know that their children are in a setting that's a very well structured, spaced, well-managed setting with an exciting opportunity for quality coverage for children where they can get support on completing their schoolwork day and enjoying some socially distanced events and activities until they are picked up at 4 by their parents. Any spaces of that 250 that are not accessed by faculty will be made available to our Westborough residents who need support for the AB rotation of the Navy Cardinal design. So I'm very excited by the way that Westborough Community Education has made a proposal that I think is very responsive to a need that's been articulated in our community of teachers and our community of residents. So I think there's pieces around that where there's two things that if that perked people's ears and they're listening. Tomorrow, the communication that will run home to faculty first will have a Google form that they can fill out to just tag us very quickly that they're interested in knowing about accessing that. And we'll share with them a snapshot on the finances and how affordable we've been able to make that in collaborating with community ed. And then we will also then in the communication that most likely will go late Thursday or early Friday morning to families, again, provide a link for them to get some information about that and for them to tag us that they're interested in accessing it if there are available spaces. Westborough Community Ed does this. It's what they do professionally. They understand it. I want to give a shout out to them, to Brian Bacon and his team for how quickly they stepped up, and also to acknowledge that they are feeling very good about the distance summer programming that they are providing and one of a few communities that was willing to step in and figure out that they felt confident providing that. So I'm very, very pleased about the status of where that stands. So we're going to move in when we're done to executive session to discuss that contract. Brian's very anxious to hear, hopefully, your validation that we can move forward with that and I can go into the details. Irene's got that contract for you to look at. There's very few spaces that I would be comfortable accommodating such a model. And in order for us to get the space that I want to present to you, I think it's really important that we move quickly. Lastly, I want to acknowledge two other things before we slip back to the conversation of the other things you want to open up. We've also been actively communicating with other districts at a very high level. And we know that there's other planning pieces that we need to face, and we're going to continue to collaborate with them. There's a couple key details, though, that I really want to be clear about. We know we need to release the Cardinal and Navy cohort delineation. We're working on that quickly. I don't think that's more than, several days. I don't want to pull it back. I don't want to give it and then pull it back because we did something wrong. We really need to run that through the cycles to look at how it impacts all the levels of schooling and busing and everything. And I think we're really close. In order for everyone to help us with that, parents are going to need to fill out some information for us around their thinking. And then I'll talk about that in just a second. The standalone remote still needs to be finalized. Transportation details, just really on numbers and implementation. I feel very good about where they are in their planning for masks, cleaning between runs, and properly managed protocols that are going to be running, I think, again, statewide practically. Fine arts guidelines are close. Athletics just released. MIA just gave an update, so I linked the update. And I think the important piece there in that update, if you don't want to click in and look at it, is they're delaying by 2 weeks the implementation of any organized sports practices when school starts until they continue to look at where they are and put out additional protocols. So they're kind of giving themselves some additional 2-week space. We do have teams within the phase 3 informal training and gathering using distancing, following all the protocols that the Board of Health approved, happening now for teams to do some, they often do team trainings in the summer that are run by the team captains. That's at place and that wouldn't alter, but we wouldn't start formal practice for at least a full 2 weeks in. I think they set a September 14th date, and another update will come. Read that link if that's pertinent to you and something you're really anxious about. Time-sensitive next steps. Our planning timeline is tight. So knowing that we have some details to lay out the hybrid and the balance of how many students are going to be in each classroom and the buses and things, I think it remains very important that we want to get everything figured out as quickly as possible. So tomorrow, it says Friday, it might come Thursday night, most likely Friday morning to you. Faculty first, probably faculties by the end of the day Thursday. Faculty and family are going to get 2 follow-up communications. For families, you need to complete a form that will indicate, will you be sending your child to school in the hybrid model with us in the fall based upon the contents of this report, which we will then resend to you tomorrow. You can drill down into all those documents and look at them. Will your child be riding the bus? And if your child is not returning for in-person, what are your plans? Are you interested in homeschooling your child, or are you thinking that you're going to access that standalone model? And then, are you interested in daycare coverage? We'll have a Google Doc for you to access, tagging us with your interest. The staff protocols have a range of different and pertinent individual things to them, and those are going to roll out fast. And they have a 10-day window, August 3rd, to hear from faculty, like a 10-day opportunity, and working with Labor Board to kind of look at details we need to help plan. And then for families, we're thinking August 7th, we give them that little extra week to make decisions based upon continuing information. So those are the big pieces, and I wanted to make sure we presented those in a big overview before we got down into kind of conversation and questions. So as of this moment, you're hearing in front of you as a committee the core components of the proposal that is our draft starting place for entering back to school in the fall. So I would turn it back to you, Kristen, and just kind of get back into the rhythm of guidance. And I do want to make one last comment on SPED, such that I would feel incredibly remiss if I didn't speak to it, and Daniel can walk you through it. But importantly, we've been in a lot of contact with our most intensive SPED families through summer programming, both online and in person. I shared data with you on their shout outs around the percentages of satisfaction, which look very, very good. We will have lots of personal, individual IEP, one-to-one conversations with liaisons and families at a very personal level for special education to make sure that those families are getting the context they need. We will also be translating these documents. We will be putting out a tight talking point sheet, and we will have lots of opportunities to continue to answer questions for families and do outreach to make sure that all of our families are feeling, and we have confidence that we've contacted every family and are interacting with them if we haven't heard from them, because we know that that's what we did to run the online in the fall, and it served us, in the spring, and it served us well. So we'll replicate that model of making sure that every family got the information, has seen this report, knows that we have some questions for them, and that we're ready to go. So I'm going to let Daniel make any additional comments he wants on SPED, and then we'll go back to final discussion questions.
I think you represented it well. There is, there's some extensive guidance from the state that's there, but we are eager to make sure that we serve our special needs students and fully implement their individual education plans, no matter what model we're in this year. And so we intend to, reach out as soon as possible and continue to provide them with the services that they need. So
thank you. The irony is not lost on me that we are discussing this in a thunderstorm that's rolling through here. So I had a question that might help families make a decision. Is extended day, the traditional EDP, going to be running in schools grades K to 6, like in the buildings when kids are in school?
So I would imagine that we will run the EDP program, and he's running the summer programming as a protocol for practice and entry, which is one of his motivations and one of our motivations, so that families, and we could anticipate to be able to better answer questions. Here's how we run it. Here's what it looks like. So yes, we will be making the necessary adjustments so that we can do all our enhanced cleaning protocols ourselves. So those spaces would get a real, again, extended look at the close of school after the 6 o'clock dismissal, and we'll probably do some different spacing, but he and I have just started drafting that. Irene is, charged with working with him to make sure that we're ready to implement that. We might have some that is a piece that we have to figure out. And the cohort groupings need to look different. But we're all committed, just as we are committed to opening school and providing the maximum number of flexible things we can do, all utilizing appropriate protocols. We will have it open.
Okay, great. I know that that is a concern for families that have utilized that in the past and will continue to need to do that. So thank you. I will open it up to other committee members for additional questions or comments. So Lisa, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I wanted to just comment that we're asking our teachers to do an awful lot. And I appreciate that there's this potential space for their children. I think it's really such a necessity. But at the same time, to recognize that half day, even though we mentioned pedagogy, we didn't really describe what that meant, even though you were describing, you know, how remote learning was different. So pedagogy is the method of teaching, and the way that remote learning is changing the way that teachers teach. That half day on the Friday is what we heard all last spring, was that the excessive amount of needing to plan for remote learning was necessary. But now, instead of, you know, now we recognize completely, as it states in the beginning of the report, that the need for collaboration and the need to think differently with remote learning, that was really emphasized in the report that you haven't seen yet. And I just wanted to reiterate it because it's going to help the process to have that half Friday for those teachers. The other thing I wanted to bring up was two pieces of the health, the cleaning protocol. One is about the HVAC system. One of the greatest concerns that I hear from teachers is about the ventilation. And I know it goes into detail about the cleaning protocols and training, but the one thing that I wondered about was, will each classroom have its vents cleaned? Will there be a protocol put in place on a regular basis for cleaning out the vents in our buildings? I know that some teachers have concerns about it. I've certainly heard that, you know, perhaps in the past the vents do not appear, you know, thoroughly cleaned. But in this, I'm hoping even after this situation that we actually have that done regularly. But that central air filtration and ventilation piece seems so vital, and I know it's on the concern of our teachers. And I really want to make sure that it's not just for the opening of school, but it's consistent throughout, that we train our custodial staff really well, and that we have oversight on it. So I don't know if you want to comment about that.
So we'll yes, the protocols we use will be year round. The procedures we add, you know, to enhance this further will be consistently monitored and part of our dashboard. So you can just hold it as part of your dashboard, and we'll define the pieces we need. And so we'll give you an update. We hired a consultant to interact with Bill and the team to give us some additional information. So I'm confident in the meeting that Irene and I held with the consultant and the team that he was very skilled, and he's interacting with districts all across the state right now. He felt that we were in a very good place. He had a lot of quality reassurance benchmarks already checked with Bill, because Bill does a very good job. That said, I acknowledge that schools are dirty places and we clean them well, but you know, we do rotate our filters, but it's more looking at both rotating filters more, and the answer is yes, we will consistently throughout the year. There's a cost impact to that, and we'll put it in front of you. And then in some cases, we'll be changing the grade of some filters based upon different HVA systems in certain spaces. So I feel like we'll have a follow-up memo. I think the general answer is we'll meet the benchmarks that provide the quality air we know we need.
Okay, another question from families is about allergies and lunch. I want to make sure that that's covered when it comes to per building, you know, in terms of how the protocols are set up so that allergies are, you know, I just didn't see it in the document, and I wanted to make sure it was not missed.
Great. We'll put it on our note, and we'll make sure when we do the protocol for lunches, you'll get a specified guideline. I mean, the buildings are they had the nurses are filter for all of that as well. And Judy will look at those protocols to cross-reference. And Irene, I mean, I would assume too that we'll just make sure that we have the nurses cross-reference the protocols for allergies when we finish up the lunch stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the final thing that really has kept coming up for a lot of people, you discussed it, but I want to make sure people recognize that I have read through it's the public draft, and there's a link to it. It's the if then, and you started to talk about it. You gave an example of it. If an individual is symptomatic, if an individual is exposed to a positive, confirmed case, if, a student or staff displays symptoms at home, if they display a symptom at school. There are many, many if-then scenarios on this document. And I just want to make sure that people recognize there's the link, you need to go to it, and it answers those questions for, I think, what is on a lot of people's minds about what happens if this happens. And the other part I wanted to just bring up is that this is a fluid situation, meaning that I would expect that you would change our course of action depending what's happening and what's happening in our schools, what's happening in the state. And so I think that's this document, by the way, I also want to mention, is completely overwhelming in terms of just the number of details in it. And so it's very possible that when people are reading through it, they might want to take a step back and then come back to the document. Why? Because for most of us, we may not be letting go. We may not have allowed ourselves to feel the loss of what is in the past. And so trying to create a new vision for what schools will look like now, it's sort of getting your head wrapped around this new way of being. And it's getting your kids wrapped around that same visual of getting them prepared for that. It will not look like it exactly did in the past, but at least there'll be this engaged, learning and at least face-to-face interaction where you have that necessary, emotional well-being piece. So just wanted to put that out there. I think that there's a lot of details that will answer a lot of questions for a lot of people. So thank you so much for the teams that put this into place. It's extraordinary. Thanks. And I'm sure questions will come up in the next, so I'm saying to the public, please feel free to reach out to us and ask.
Thank you, Lisa. Steve, and then we'll do Sarah and Raghu. So we'll kind of just go in that order if you have questions. So Steve, why don't you go ahead if you have questions or comments?
I have a couple of comments. It's amazing how much information is in there. Obviously, you couldn't answer every question because you can't think of everyone, but I think many of the things that I was concerned about when I made my comment earlier at least have the beginning of the answer, if not the whole answer. So I think that's quite impressive to me. One thing that does occur to me, though, because anybody who's been standing there at 6 feet different distance with somebody else with a mask on, you have to listen very carefully. So I'm wondering whether or not we will have microphones for the teachers if they're wearing, face covering and perhaps a shield as well. So I would hope that John Green could kind of check out how we might make sure that the kids can hear what the teacher is trying to teach.
No, that's a great point. It's interesting. And Daniel, we should make a note about that. Just like, this is how we've been doing this, guys. Oh, that's an idea. We got to work on it. We did surface that because, again, we ran leadership today with the gear on and finding our, implementation protocols and just, how long it felt like we were before we maybe thought we needed a mask break and that type of stuff. And, and I do think that we've thought about, different sound amplification kind of ideas, and we'll drill down on that. John's good at that.
That's it for me.
Thanks, Steve. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. I always just like to start by thanking everyone that worked extensively on the support, the people that stepped up to be on the committee. Appreciate all your time and thoughtfulness. And like Steve said, and Amber just said, you think of questions as you go along and write them down and move on. So thanks for using the survey data, your thoughtfulness, based on research. Always appreciate Daniel's research. Very good articles. If anyone even gets those articles when they're done reading the safety requirements. I did write down a list of questions. I crossed off half of them because you answered some, and the rest I thought we could all just email to Kristen, because that's what we do when we see these reports, and then spend the next, like you keep saying, time sending in your questions, your thoughts to us. So and to Amber and to Kristen and everyone. So feel free to do that, everyone. I do have I actually piggyback on Kristen's EDP question. At the after school, maybe that would be something we'd put in the survey as well. Like, would you be utilizing the regular after school EDP just to get a gauge of numbers? Or maybe Brian can email the people that have used that service before just to see numbers on that. Maybe also putting this whole report on the website as we usually do. Also, other members of the community are very interested in what's happening in the schools too, so that would be helpful to them. And I'm assuming that we're going to have, I saw you on the Board of Health last night. I'm assuming we're going to have this all reviewed by the Board of Health as well. Our Board of Health, at some point. So, because we can use their expertise to think of other things that we haven't even thought of. And then I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't mention fail specifically just because of the construction. And I know they don't have an HVAC system over there, just like airflow and circulation there, and the windows being open with the dust. Versus windows being closed and things like that. I'm sure you've covered that with Mary Ann, but I just wanted to touch on that a bit.
So they do have so I just don't want us to leave here with we do have a functioning HVAC system. The air circulation system at Fails is actually very functional. And Steve can speak to some of the years of replacement and items we did. Remember when we submitted for getting Fails done, the protocols on the level of strong systems that had been kept well maintained at Fails came through very well. I think that certainly construction had layers of things around opening windows, but the majority of our protocols are around increasing circulation, utilizing the HVAC system because it filters air as opposed to just always opening windows. And I think there's some balance there. So I think people will know that we are studying those protocols, looking at what the consultants are saying to create the appropriate balance of comfort, noise, allergens from outside, and fresh air cycling. So again, I think people need to know that there's a lot of people that have expertise that are leaning in and looking at that, and we'll create something that gives us, by building, modified as needed to provide the best possible circumstance in each building.
One of the good things about where the project is right now, the excavation is complete. As I said earlier in the meeting, that the backfilling of the new building is occurring, and so there'll be a time not too long from now where we can stabilize the pile that has to remain in order to backfill the old school when it's demolished. But we can basically encapsulate it so that in fact there won't be dust and it won't blow around. So I'll bring that up at the next construction meeting to see if we can get people started to think about doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I think that was all my questions. So like I said, we can just email all the rest of them to Kristen.
Sure, I'll take them. I don't promise to answer them all, but I'll take them. And then
certainly there's an escalation on filter turnover. I mean, we do it anyways more than what's required, but we're going to upkick that. So
yeah,
just so it's reassured that that's happening.
And then we'll track all of that for COVID reimbursement at any potential level through the CARES grant, and anything FEMA will allow. FEMA relates more to PPE. And then we'll see, based upon the implementation cost of the standalone model, how we utilize that additional funding in that last grant that she said that from the Baker Polito administration, which would really help us to try to fund some of that and some other types of planning gaps. All right.
Thank you. I just want to see if Raghu had anything that he wanted to ask or comment on.
Yeah, I just thanks, Kristen. I just had a quick comment where I'm more concerned about. I mean, amongst some of my concerns was the cafeteria area. So it's very hard to control kids, even though we set up protocols and say sit 6 feet apart and wear masks. I mean, especially eating lunch, they won't be. So I was thinking if we have a box lunch that they can carry it back to the classroom and be under the supervision of the teacher. I know they would miss that time socializing, but that's the exact point, right? We need to stop those socializing.
Well, we need to help them socialize with a new normal. But to just comment, Raghu, the protocols that are outlined do require the same 6-foot distancing to eat without a face mask. And so the principals and custodial team have already mapped out the cafeteria and other working spaces and thought about each of their lunch rotations. And there is a protocol by which some students remain in the classroom and eat. Some could rotate to the cafeteria or other large open spaces that we use to provide that lunch break, monitored by appropriate staff or faculty or whoever. But we also then rotate all of our paraeducators, other people. We have neonates that work already to help with lunches, as well as then, faculty who do some lunch coverages at times, but all of that against their need to take a break and have their own lunch. So all of that gets mapped out into the socially distanced work. And then I think you'll hear from a lot of teachers in planning, just as one thing we haven't mentioned at all, a lot of planning to get kids outside through the fall and do a lot of outdoor work, both for wellness classes, but also for outdoor conversation and for larger circle groups and, picnic outside. Like those types of things are all part of what teachers are thinking around leveraging September and October, when the weather tends to be absolutely beautiful in New England, to leverage that to do spacing and appropriate social mask-free gathering.
Thank you. This is an incredible document that you and your team have put together. I should say documents, because within it are these layers of other links. And so I just want to review next steps with everyone, that this will all be emailed out through ConnectEd to parents and families and caregivers, and faculty and staff who are a member of the Westborough Public Schools District. And along with the email link to this draft document, just want to be clear, it's still a draft, will be questions. And we need parents and staff to quickly respond back to us. We want you to take your time to look at the document, take your time to make the best decision you can with your family, but also know that it's time sensitive. So we would prefer a quick turnaround on some answers, so that our planning can move forward. We're kind of like in limbo until we get this next round of information, and then we can move forward. And then planning will continue. Our next school committee meeting is August 12th. And we'll be meeting again at 6 p.m. It will be a remote meeting just like this. We'll do the best we can to let everyone know how to tune in, where to find the broadcast. And at that meeting, we'll be reviewing, I guess, more final plans, because the state will have weighed in and be voting on, firstly, we have to vote on changes in calendar, vote in this plan, and some policy changes that might change as well. Did I summarize that correctly?
No, you did. And just to add a couple pieces there, the faculty and families were super good about responding to the survey quickly. I think we'll see a high rate of response on these documents as well. People that want to homeschool need to send that in targeted and specific, so there's things that people have done that they've figured out really well and have been, organized. So the other thing that I wanted to highlight was that, we have to submit to this. The state is requesting you to submit the final. We have to do a preliminary on the 31st. We'll get that done and submitted following this stuff. And then the 10th to the state. I won't send it until the 12th when you vote. So the document will be really finished. It's literally going to have to be ready to go into the state, and you'll be reacting to it and, kind of giving us the final approval on that. And I'll submit to the state late until you have an opportunity to vote. That'll be, we'll just have to wait. They won't have looked at all of them yet, I don't think. And then the other piece is I want to talk with Kristen about it. And Kristen, we can talk about this after this meeting, but I also think we can provide some, Zoom meetings of coffee conversation where one school committee member and we can make ourselves available to talk to people that want to come to a meeting and sign on to come and ask questions. Do you have questions about lunch? You can come to this chat. Do you have questions? Like, we can make ourselves available as possible to provide at least one or two open opportunities to have people kind of come in and ask their questions, which might be easier than aspects of the inundation of ongoing email, which just can really blow everybody up in terms of, I do ask that before people send you guys emails and send us emails, that they read things and take at least a 24-hour breath to let you digest information, because we want to hear from you, but we also want to be thoughtful in how email and our desire to respond matches to where you are, and that it doesn't have 3 iterations to it. So try to take a breath, take a look at the document. You've got some time, talk to people, and then send us an email in 2 days. Give us the time to then think about. We will have a chance to say, we can do another open call meeting like this, and people can sign up, and we'll send them a link and they can come on. People do large group. I mean, the commissioner does 200 group Zoom meetings. They're not open conversation. They're submit your chat and we answer it. So it's a controlled, well-managed way to hear from large numbers of people. I'm not opposed to that. Kristen, why don't you and I talk about it and come up with some ideas? We want people to know that we understand your questions. And I think this document is fairly comprehensive, but we will try to find ways to support your needs within an appropriate way that we can manage it. We have a lot of moving pieces to get nailed down here.
Yeah, I agree. And I was going to say, and just know that if anyone's asking us questions, our answers are coming from that document. So look there first, send us blind spots or things that we missed. Go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry, just to clarify again, I just got a question. The survey would go out like between now and Friday, and then it would be due back by the 7th?
Yes.
That's what I heard. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the one that I want from staff, I think the labor board group email that we'll put out with some links for things. I mean, my priority is get that link to staff that will say, are you interested in the daycare? And it's a Google form, you guys, that people can give us feedback on really quickly. And your priority, I have a lot of confidence that those 250 slots will meet our needs for all faculty that want to access it for K-6 and 4-year-olds, specific to faculty only. And so, yes, that will go out. I'm hoping to get back from staff by the 3rd, because I want to use it to leverage the next tier of decisions. But again, all that's being done collaboratively with that subcommittee with Labor Board, which Lisa's on, and Bill and Eric and all this team of people coming together to say, what are staff telling us? How can we do this work? I'm sure that they'll all get questions as well. And that's good, because then we use those to leverage just improving our planning. And, so that will all be done by Friday. So, all right.
Thank you, everyone. Keeping an eye on the time. I know we're all facing difficult decisions, and so keep your eyes out for that email, and let's just continue to support each other as we navigate our time moving forward together. So we do have need for an executive session. So
do you need a motion?
I'll go ahead. I have it, so I'll go ahead and I'll do it. So I make a motion that we meet an executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for tutors, custodians, school lunch workers, and under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 22G2, Purpose 7, to review and approve executive session minutes. Thank you, everybody. We need to do a roll call vote. So,
Sarah will second the motion.
Sarah second, and then Sarah, you will.
Julie, yes.
Go for it. Raghu.
London, yes.
Lisa.
Edinburgh, yes.
Steve.
Durrett, yes.
And then Vincent, yes. 5-0. We are in executive session. Thank you, everyone.
Anybody who hasn't signed off yet that's listening, we care about you. So I hope that, you're thinking of us.
She's a turn a light on.
Turn a light on.